not as much as what is being said as what is not being said. There has been no feasibility study or cost analysis of this entire project. The question has never been answered as to how plans can be made for high density and commercial development without a plan. The first things that should have been addressed are water, sewer, roads, and other infrastructure. Quoting Supervisor Thomas in his comments to the Calaveras Enterprise, residents of Rancho Calaveras are nervous about being forced to hook up to a sewer system. Supervisor Thomas asked CCWD about this concern. Their comment was, when you consider the vast acreage and associated costs, it is just not going to happen. This being so stated, why are we considering the Greater Valley Springs plan, which appears to be highly impractical with no benefits to the residents involved? This is called dreaming. We, the people, did not ask for the Valley Springs plan update to include a city we cannot afford, nor do we want it as such. Our main request is to keep our Rancho Calaveras rural residential lifestyle without change and government interference. If we, the people, at some future date decide that change itself is necessary, we, the people, will be the deciding factor, not the government or entity. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Is there anyone else who has an item?
Good morning, Board of Supervisors.
Morning.
My name is Doris Toth. My residence is in Rancho Calaveras. I am here to present a letter in response to the presentation by Tyler Somerset, who is Transportation Planner for the Calaveras Council of Governments, that he made before you, the Board of Supervisors, as reported in the Calaveras Enterprise on January 18th, 2010. Mr. Somerset stated, it was residents of the west end of the county who were responsible for the planning process funding in the first place. We have citizens in this area to thank, he said, for securing the $255,000 grant to accomplish this Herculean task. But the facts are as follows. The State of California Caltrans grant application states that the applicant is the Calaveras Council of Governments with Tim McSorley as Executive Director, signed January 11, 2008, and submitted to Caltrans. Has an official grant document been falsified? Is there confusion as to who applied for the grant? The Caltrans grant was actually for $204,648 with a source of local match by the Calaveras Council of Governments for $51,162. It seems there is confusion here also. The Enterprise reported on January 18th, 2010, that CCOG sent out 5,900 surveys and only 1,000 were returned. The Enterprise reported on August 26th of 2009 that EDA sent out 5,000 surveys and only 700 were returned. A stakeholder reported there were 6,000 surveys sent out and only 700 returned. Is there a contradiction here? What is the correct answer? The only survey that was sent out had 6 questions. 1, do you consider yourself a resident of Valley Springs? 2, with which neighborhood or community do you most identify? 3, how long have you lived in the Valley Springs area? 4, what are the most important factors for you in choosing a community? 5, what would you most like to see improved in Valley Springs? 6, in a few words, what is your favorite place in Valley Springs? Regarding the first question in the survey, do you consider yourself a resident of Valley Springs? Well, the consultants claimed they had no understanding that the 95252 zip code for Valley Springs covered such a broad area. Rural mail delivery in the Valley Springs outlying areas, and Burson used the Valley Springs zip code. It is used for rural route delivery. It does not designate the existing Valley Springs community boundaries. The survey has spoiled the Valley Springs Community Plan update because it began with survey results with misleading information. Sent out to the entire 95252 outlying area when the existing Valley Springs Community Plan update was intended for Valley Springs proper.
Ms. Toth, you have a minute left.
Thank you. I'm hoping that Chair will be kind to me today if I have to run over.
You've already done 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So you have a minute left.
Thank you. This was discussed and pointed out by the citizenry at the workshop, and the consultants were well informed of their error and made no attempt to correct it. They are using these figures to reach their consensus for a Caltrans grant application written almost 2 years before public review. All this without the knowledge or representation of the landowners within the proposed Valley Springs to Jenny Lind area. There was no outreach within the proposed boundaries. These people remain uninformed in that their lands have been included within the plan update or that their land is included within the Caltrans grant. The public demands full disclosure and accountability. Elected officials must respect the public's right to accurate surveys, votes, and petitions by the landowners within the proposed boundaries and outlying areas. And at that point, I'll stop. I have copies for each one of you. Thank you very much.
Just a second.
Okay. Tom, would you give her one of these?
Okay. Please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name's Steve Elias. I live in Glencoe, and I'm not here this morning representing Sierra Club or Evans Task Force Watch or any other radical fringe elements of the community. Just as a private citizen and a big fan of Calaveras County who wants us really to get things right. The main reason I'm here today is to support myvalleysprings.com. I really believe that they're getting a real bad rap. I don't know why, but it's apparent that it's happening, and you guys are being pressured in ways that I don't think you should be. You know, I happen to be a person who believes in planning for the future. I think that basically that's what myvalleysprings.com is all about. I think it's one thing to say, okay, there are individuals in myvalleysprings.com who have a certain vision, a certain idea of what they want the community to look like, and you can disagree with that, that's fine, present your vision, your ideas, but I think it's not fair to say to these folks who I know for a fact have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's when it came to trying to get the public involved in the process. It's not fair at this point in time to say, hey, you know what, you didn't make any efforts to alert the community about what's going on, because they did, and I think that's a fact. I think it's substantiated in the record that was given to you, I believe, last week, about every single thing they did to make sure that the public was included as much as possible. So, that's really all I want to say. But as long as I'm here, I'd like to put in a little plug for the Calaveras Planning Coalition. I don't know how many people around here really are that familiar with the group. I know that you guys probably are, but I think they do excellent work. Sierra Club is a formal member, but I have attended a lot of their meetings. And when it comes to the general plan, we're getting down to the point where it's going to be crunch time pretty soon in terms of CEQA and the entire process. We're doing a lot better than we did in 1996. I mean, that was a total fiasco. I spent months coming in and talking to the acting planning director at the time. I know that county council had to be involved. I know that it cost a lot of money. Now we have a very public process, but pretty soon it's going to get tight. Tom Infusino is kind of the mentor, staff person for the Planning Coalition. He's very, very well acquainted with CEQA. He really cares about the process. This group as a whole, that's basically what they're oriented to, is process stuff. And that's what's going to really count going forward. I think personally that if the board and the planning department really work with Tom,
It was a colorful weekend. I'd like to move to the consent agenda. These items are normally routine, non-controversial. If any member of the board, staff, or public would like to pull an item, please say so. May I have a motion, please?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Passes on a 5-0. We're now in adjournment till 9:10.
Now you have the same position.
make sure that you didn't run into any kind of legal problems or problems that we had, 96, 97, 98. That shouldn't happen again, and let Tom take you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elias.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Mickey Parks. I live in Rancho Calaveras. I've been there 32 years, and we've had our property for almost 40 years. So I consider myself a semi-long resident. I'm a stakeholder for the Valley Springs Community Plan. We, the stakeholders, were told we would participate in the survey questionnaires. We were not included, and the survey was mailed out before we had any input. We were excluded from any decision-making. The The consultants did the survey without our knowledge and mailed them out without our approval. We were not even allowed to be present when they were counted. Hazel Kane and I visited CCOG, Tim McSorley's office, more than 3-4 times in regards to this matter and complained about the surveys, how the surveys were handled, and also wanted to stay out of the Valley Springs community. Because of our rural location in Rancho and Burson, we were given the runaround and double talk. We received the survey and were disappointed by its content of misleading questions. The consultants wanted to tie the rural areas to the communities. People moved to the rural areas to get away from the community and city life. The consultants want to bring everything together to make an eventual city. This has been mentioned many times by the Greater Valley Springs Advisory Group, basically some membership as myvalleysprings.com, a project partner of the Caltrans grant. This does not represent what the people want in this area, or what they moved here for and invested in the area. We paid our taxes, we own our property, and we are excluded from decision-making. Stakeholders attended every meeting and nothing was accomplished. They didn't listen to anything anybody said. We were warm bodies, sitting in chairs, attending meetings that were legally required by law. CCOG did what they wanted and listened to no one. They had their own agenda and left the landowners out. They didn't even advertise the stakeholders' meeting so that the public could attend. And I have a few other things to say, but I think I'll just reserve it for next time.
Thank you, Ms. Parks.
And I have a copy for you.
Good morning. My name's Bonnie Newman. I'm from Double Springs, and I know I always come to you all with a couple of issues. I'm going to rag at you. Today I'm not. I mean, maybe later, but I actually have some good news, and I want to share it with you all. And this is not like me. I'm going to read a letter. This is to all interested parties. This is from me, Bonnie Newman, regarding my client. As you all know, I have a client in IHSS who has some severe problems. I finally have some hopeful news to share with you all. I received a phone call yesterday from UC Davis Department of Neurological Surgery. Christy DeLimos, nurse practitioner, has been coordinating the procedure to replace the bone flap on Roger's skull. Besides the notice that UC Davis is ready to schedule the surgery, she also informed me that she had just attended a conference at UC San Francisco Medical Center. Apparently, they've done a survey of individuals with missing skull caps. They found that the longer the skull cap is missing, the higher the incidence and the greater the increase in psychosis. That means if you have a hole in your head, all your senses can be leaving you. I mean, this is just the way I'm thinking of it in my visual terms. And when the bone flap is replaced, that means when the hole's plugged, sometimes the psychosis subsides. I mean, this is like a miracle. My client's bone flap was removed in 2001. That's 9 years ago. His overt psychosis began about 2.5 years ago. Already I have people telling me, well, he's not going to get better. It's been too long. I just want you to know that person doesn't know my client. My client has survived 3 open skull brain surgeries where not only the tumor was removed, but brain tissue was being pulled out. This guy, after his second surgery, the day after he was 8 hours in surgery, woke up, pulled out his tubes, put on his brace and said, "I'm not staying here anymore, I want to go home." I had to go the day after he had open head brain surgery and pick him up from the hospital and bring him home. This guy is determined. This guy has a life force that can't quit. If anybody can survive having no skull for almost 10 years and be able to come back and have some kind of life, it's going to be Roger. I just can't tell you how excited I am about this, and I'll let you know what that turns out to be.
Bonnie, thank you for your dedication to him.
Bonnie, if you could come up here for a moment, I'd like to give you a random act of kindness. Actually, the truth of the matter is that every IHSS provider in this county does probably 100 acts of kindness, although maybe not technically random. That is your life. And somebody who's dedicated, as you have, a good part of your life to trying to make somebody else's life dignified and just. To me, that's earning hundreds of these, but I've only got one here, so I'd like to...
Steve, why don't you walk down here?
That's all right, sure.
She can take a picture.
Getting the medical system, or getting it to do what it's supposed to do, is a miracle. So we should not only have a random act of kindness, but also a miracle provider reward, but hopefully that will suffice for both. But thanks for everything you've been doing.
I have some other good news.
Bonnie, your time is like 30 seconds.
Okay, this is a different subject.
30 seconds.
Okay. Last weekend, I had the opportunity to attend a statewide conference in San Jose at the Improving IHSS Through Community Collaboration. And it was a great effort for me to get there because we had to pay our own way and pay our own room, but the union kicked in the registration. There, I was able to make contact. I'm going to brag here, okay? Donna Kalane, Executive Director of the IHSS Public Authority in San Francisco. We have a date. Eldon Luce, Public Authority Manager for San Mateo County. We have a date. Okay. Michelle Rousey, Chair of the Public Authority Advisory Board. She's the new Secretary of the SICA conference that we attended. And I have a contact. Communities Active Living, Independent and Free, Lilibeth Navarro from Los Angeles. We have an excellent
Bonnie, you're
connection.
pushing the clock.
I know. I just want to brag a little bit more because besides these ones, I made a contact with members of our IHSS Advisory Board in Calaveras County. As much as I grind away at the public authority, I was just starting to touch on the IHSS Advisory Board. Now I think they might start doing a little grinding themselves. So that's
good.
That's it for now.
Thank you. Does anyone else have an item?
They're allowed to have more than one, right? Marty Crane, I live in Rancho. When listening to Bonnie, I want to say, Bonnie, thank you. I watch the supervisor meetings on television, and I frequently see Bonnie, and I go, that a girl, keep on. And it reminds me of Ross Perot when he said something about being the grain of sand in the oyster that irritates you until you develop a pearl. Something like that, I remember. I thought, oh, that was very cool. But anyway, I digress. Beautifully, though. I'm looking for opportunities today. I'd like our sign to be higher, more visible. With regard to...
God, it's magic. I'd like to move to the next item, which is public comments. If anyone has anything they'd like to address to the board, not on the agenda.
Well, I'm Billy Westernoff, and I'm here representing the Seeds of Kindness, and we have some wonderful Seeds of Kindness participation kits for each one of you wonderful supervisors.
Is this kindness?
And we'd like to thank you very, very much for your resolution declaring February 15th through the 21st Kindness Week. And I see your kindness zone is kind of propped up there, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I mean, I'm glad to see it there. And we just want to thank you very much. And your kindness kits contain one yellow sign, which you already have. You have a copy of the signed resolution. You have 800 feet of the blue ribbon for your district to tie wherever. And you have your kindness instruction ribbons. Not instructions on how to be kind, because we know you know how to do that. You don't need instructions on that one. And you have Pass It Forward, the ribbons. You have a list of kindness activities, and then there's a CD in here with all kinds of information for you, and then there's the random acts of
Valley Springs. I hear a lot of we the people in Rancho. I'd like to speak for myself. I don't particularly want other people to make broad statements about we and include me, and maybe other people that don't wish to be part of that we, that want to speak for themselves. Better, thank you. Now we look past Marita's smiling face to kindness. So I just like to say that I'm going to read this so I don't take it.
You're taking your time.
I don't want to. Understandably, our busy lives sometimes preclude us from participating in many of the important things that we would like to do. Sometimes we're so focused on other things that something important like a community planning process may not be on our radar. Once alerted and motivated to act, our participation furthers the planning process and helps to generate a more comprehensive and balanced community plan. At some point, we all have to take responsibility for the fact that we sometimes make a conscious decision not to get involved. And later, when we're not so committed to other efforts, we find that we can. Like many others, my experience to date with this process has been a learning experience. Challenging, exciting, invigorating, and very much an exercise in community that reinforces my beliefs that our friends and neighbors are ready and able to engage in the purpose of planning and protecting our future. No one ever said that Community 101 was easy. It is, however, rewarding beyond measure. A group known as DIG, Downtown Improvement Group, was one in a string of grassroots efforts to, quote, fix up our town and begin an effort to engage the community. Little progress was made, if any. It wasn't until a small group of Calaveras residents recognized a need for planning to ensure that our watersheds and beautiful rural Calaveras lifestyle would be protected and preserved. They stepped up, got organized, and we now know them as myvalleysprings.com. From the beginning, it was their sole purpose and mission to bring educational opportunities to our community, to inform and empower our citizens to speak and plan for themselves. They invested many hours, months, and now years into educating themselves and working to bring in educational workshops to the Valley Springs area so that we could all effectively participate and make our voices heard. I have been honored to participate in this important community planning process. In 2008, because our county had no funding for the community plan, myvalleysprings.com partnered with our local council of governments, and I believe the LLC or someone else, and others in the community, to write and obtain a $250,000 grant to fund our community planning process. An amazing gift to our whole community. This entire planning process has been at all times open and transparent, focused on broad community participation, continually striving to leave no one unheard. Through this process, we can produce a plan that will provide those who come to invest in our community with a well-conceived plan portraying the wishes of the local citizens. Change is coming. Development is coming. Wouldn't it be nice if we liked what we saw when it got here? Developers coming to the Valley Springs area would be only too happy to find the direction that would help them to focus on a project that would ultimately be welcomed by the local citizens. Anything less would constitute a waste of their time and money, and ultimately dissatisfaction within our communities. There will no doubt be areas or issues individual to each community participant, but I challenge you to come and respectfully present your concerns and suggest viable solutions or suggested verbiage to be inserted that would adequately address that portion of the plan. This is our plan, and it's up to us to make sure it speaks for all of our residents. None of us will get everything we want, but together we can create something special and unique for our Valley Springs area.
Thank you, Ms. Kane.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do.
Does anyone else have an item for the agenda? Yes. I mean, the public comment. Thank you.
Go, Bob.
My name is Darren Spellman. I live in Rancho Calaveras, section of District 5, Calaveras County. I came here today to see what was being said by my fellow Rancho residents since I reside there. I also state that I am a candidate for District 5 supervisor seat, and the things that have been mentioned here today by the majority of the people who reside in my area of the district, which would be Rancho Calaveras, I would say was the catalyst for me throwing my hat in to run for supervisor seat. Although I know Rancho is not, the whole district. It happens to be the part that I live in, and so that was the catalyst for me running for District 5 supervisor. I think that Ms. Crane, was it, that spoke last? Ms. Crane? She brings up a valid argument about her own concerns of being represented and being swept into, overgeneralization of populace. And I think that part of the problem lies in, it seems to be that people feel like if Rancho isn't part of the plan, then the plan dies. But it doesn't have to. And one of the things, having done some brief, a little bit of planning myself in the past, that usually we're concerned with things where residential and commercial zoning. Rancho's already been planned. As far as the commercial zoning, there could be some things that need to be updated, with regards to that around the Valley Springs general area, closer to Marval and those type of things like that. But I don't see whether there's anything beneficial for Rancho being involved in that Greater Valley Springs plan, and that's my opinion. As an elected official, if I am so lucky as to be elected as supervisor for District 5, I will adhere to what the wishes of my constituency wants in regard to inclusion or non-inclusion. But it seems to me that general consensus, the populace, is that it not be included. Just last, before I leave, in doing some research for my supervisor bid, I noticed that one of the questions that was presented to Mr. Tofinelli from the Valley Springs News was what member of the supervisory board did he have most in common with regarding his philosophies of government. And with that in mind, thinking that the same question could be posed to myself, I just wanted to let you know that I'll be sending an email to each supervisor, District 1 through 4, asking to meet with you for just briefly at some point at your own convenience, which you can get back to me on, so that I can have an idea as to what your particular philosophies are, so that if I am asked the same question, that I make sure that I have a clear knowledge of who I'm agreeing with or what things that we share in common. And I can generally say from researching comments that have been posted in the paper and on the web that it seems to me that all the supervisors here today have the best interests of their constituents in mind, and I really appreciate your work and dedication. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spellman. Are there any other comments for the board?
Good morning. My name is Holly Mines, and I do not live in Rancho Calaveras. I live in the famous Railroad Flat. And I just want to weigh in a little bit on this issue. As a former member of the Planning Commission, I just want to point out that when I first sat on the Planning Commission back in January of 2005, I was amazed that when we would hold meetings, we basically held meetings in front of an empty audience. People did not come at all, and we made our decisions, based on the record and asked questions, but nobody came. Then a big issue did come up in Valley Springs, and suddenly the chambers filled with people, and they were very, very anxious and worried about issues related to safety, traffic, flooding, all the things that we're talking about when we do community planning. And so I actually asked some of the people who stood up if they had talked to their supervisor. There were actually people in the audience who didn't even know they had a supervisor, let alone their supervisor's name. There were people who did not know that there was a public record, that they could go and look at the whatever was being proposed in advance of the meeting and even meet with the person who was proposing the project. And not long after that, I began to see a change in the chambers. People began to come and listen to the deliberations and to educate themselves. And out of that, eventually, not really out of our Planning Commission meetings, but during that year was the beginning of the discussion that we needed to update our community plan. And I think the decision was made in December of 2005 to hire consultants to begin to do the community planning process. So we've been in this process now for about 3 or 4 years, and from a person who's been very involved in planning in my own community, I feel that the word is out, and that if people just talk to their neighbors, the papers are filled with them. Maybe people don't read the papers, but we now have many forms of media to inform ourselves. And so I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is we went through a very difficult and long planning process up in our area, and we finally did come to some resolution, and I can assure you that all of us that were in the room did not agree with each other when we first sat down. But we hashed things out, we took votes, each one of us made compromises, and we came up with very...
behind this book, which is what inspired Jim and Judy Bergantz to do this, and start this several years ago. And one thing that Jim wanted to mention last time when we were here was that a couple of years ago his wife was working at the candy store in Columbia, and Judy's a sweetheart anyway. I can't imagine her ever not being kind, but a tourist came up and gave her one of the ribbons. And she thanked him, and then she looked at the ribbon and she realized it was a ribbon that she had given to somebody 2 years previously. So it goes full circle. As you give, so shall you receive. So we just want to thank you very much, and we want to present you with your kindness packets.
Thank you, Bill Layton.
And can I step across the
threshold? Thank you.
Across the threshold? Watch out for the laser beam. It's just dropping all kinds of ribbons. You just got trail ribbon behind you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. I thought, man, that kindness that you're giving me some steak.
Oh, you're right. You sure you're with that? This will have to go on our... This will have to go on our...
This is your shirt. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Envious of the fact that the people in Valley Springs have money and consultants and people available to help them make a community plan. And what I would say to them is, why don't we try to observe the kindness zone? Why don't we stop pointing fingers at each other, calling people names, accusing people of doing things underhandedly or secretly or being influenced by outside agencies? I don't believe that's true. I believe that everybody in my Valley Springs, and even those people who I might not agree with, really want the best for their own community. And so if we can put aside the implication that if you are in one group, you're being led by some outside organization or you're being funded in some way that is influencing your thinking. I know the people of myvalleysprings.com. I'm also on the Planning Commission. I'm on the Planning Coalition. And our sole interest is the idea of smart growth means preserving our rural lifestyle, which was the #1 priority when Mintier went around and met with every single community. Preserving rural lifestyle was the #1 priority. Smart growth means that. Smart growth means preserving small communities so that we can have larger areas around. We can create connectedness to other communities. We can have paths. I just went on a trip to Spain and I walked 450 miles across Spain, and I was able to walk on a path without touching anybody's private property the whole way across. I walked for 29 days and was able to cross the entire country. And I thought to myself, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing in Calaveras if we could have paths all over. We could have people with little B&Bs or their little wineries or their little stands that people could walk around, see the beautiful countryside, spend the night, have a meal with somebody, and move on. And we would bring wonderful and positive attention to this county. And so I think we have solutions here. We have the makings of it. We have the resources. We have the people. We have the beautiful land. So let's stop pointing fingers and start working on something which we can all be proud of and which will bring positive attention to our community and make for a better place for us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Marks.
Hi, my name is Richard Clough, and I live in Rancho Calaveras. I don't consider myself living in Valley Springs proper, Rancho. We have a Valley Springs post office number, 95252. That's what we have. And the major consensus of the people that we've talked to want to keep Rancho out of that. And one of the problems I have with the planning is I went to a stakeholders meeting, and I wasn't really irritated when I went there, but when I left I was. There was a 35-year person that's lived in the county for 35 years, and one of the people that is in charge of the MyValleySprings.com, and it's probably on the record, I'm sure that there's somewhere it's been written down. She turned to the gentleman and said, if you don't like being planned for, move to Amador. And I'm sure it's on the record somewhere. So it's not just one side that's been getting this. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't particularly care about conspiracies. What I care about is you people listening to what we have found to be a majority of people. You're going to get further proof of it. So just keep an open mind. Realize that there's friction on both sides of this thing, and realize that there's people out there in Rancho Calaveras that want to keep Rancho Calaveras like it is, with its special plan. It's pretty important to those people. Well, that concludes what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I wrote 2 cents worth on this piece of paper, so I'm going to put it up here.
You can tell us what it is after you identify yourself.
That was the extent of it. My name is Darrell Rusk. I live at 101 Melcher Lane, Valley Springs, Burson. And my phone number is 772-0225. I'm never anonymous. My son and I have a slight disagreement. He likes the idea of landscaping, of predetermining what trees go where, what plants go where, and he's very selective in when he buys plants or trees because he knows where he wants to put them and knows what he wants them to do. I tend to be a person who prefers a certain serendipity. If something grows where, gosh, it wasn't supposed to, I let it. If I see a sale on trees, I buy them. I plant them. They weren't what I planned for the garden, but it doesn't matter because there is that surprise. There is that refreshing naturalness about the serendipity of that sort of thing. Well, I have a concern because it seems to me that we have a 6th member of the Board of Supervisors. I may be wrong, but in looking at the website for the Tides Foundation, they list the Evetts Pass Forest Watch as one of their recipients. They list My Valley Springs as another recipient, and I don't know what others are in Calaveras County that are receiving either directly or indirectly money from the Tides Foundation, but the Tides Foundation is directly tied with George Soros, with Acorn, and with a variety of extreme left-wing organizations, including the Earth Liberation Front. At least the Earth Liberation Front claimed that they were at least partly funded by the Tides Foundation. ELF, you may remember, was the organization that had a habit of burning down car dealerships and building developments. So I'm concerned with the potential for influence by the Tides Foundation. This is a very small county. Why are they so involved? So that's the question. I don't have an answer to it. So I guess I only have one sentence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rusk. Marty?
No.
No, please, thank you. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I hope you won't hear much soon. I have something to say about myvalleysprings.com.
After you
I will wait
tell us
till next week because it's been way over 15 minutes for coffee.
I know it has,
Thank
but
you.
you just identify yourself and tell us you're going to be back next week.
My name's Claude. I'm from Rancho Calaveras, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Sounds
Thank you.
like a winner to me. Thank you. Mr. Stolman?
Good morning. I'm Howard Stolman, your Chief Information Officer. Just wanted to give you an update. As you know, the President's stimulus package, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, or ARA, contained funding for rural broadband, which would allow better internet access throughout our county. As you probably recall, there was an effort led by ATCA to apply for some last-mile projects, and mostly they were community network centers and such. They made application during the first round. In a parallel effort, I brought together various public and private entities to work on an application for a middle-mile project. Unfortunately, the work required and the work required for the submission and the deadlines present proved to be greater than we could accomplish. So we were not able to apply for round one funding. I was approached at our statewide association conference by Mr. John Thomas Flynn. Mr. Flynn was the first state Chief Information Officer, and he's currently working with Terry Takai, our current Chief Information Officer, about the possibility of using state infrastructure, state towers, as a way to distribute broadband access to rural areas. And I was asked by Mr. Flynn if we would be interested in working with him and his team that he put together, be the same team that helped Siskiyou County apply for a $23 million project for round one funding. I emphasized to Mr. Flynn then and lots of times after that we were not in a position to afford his services. And he reassured me that their consulting group received no money from the county, that they were only paid if the grant application was successful. So with that information, I recontacted that same group of round one participants. We met with Mr. Flynn and his team in Angels Camp several weeks ago. And the team agreed that it was worth exploring round two application. Mr. Flynn also pointed out the real reason for the ERA application is for economic development or stimulus to the county. With that in mind, he suggested that we bring in, enlist the help of an economic development partner. And we met as a group and decided to ask the Central Sierra Economic Development District for their help in a round two application. I've been in dialogue with Mr. Busby and Alpine County Supervisor Terry Woodrow and Russ Thomas, and together Mr. Busby has agreed to be the applicant for a round two effort. So we'll be meeting with him, or I'll be meeting with his group in February to discuss round two application. Our work on round two continues today, actually this afternoon. We'll be having a technical discussion to start our infrastructure design and see where we might actually want to take advantage of the internet backbone that we could deploy using state and private and public resources. I want to assure the board
Billy.
Billy, the question is how long does the random act of kindness period last so we can get back to our normal lives? 12 months?
Hey, Billy, can you repeat that part again about wonderful supervisor part? Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
Make sure you tell everybody in the audience, because public comments is coming up, that it's a random act of kindness day.
You know, one nice thing about having the kindness zone sign, if you place it in a prominent area, if somebody starts to get, you can say, oh, that is the kindness zone.
Good morning, honorable supervisors.
Morning,
I have a few words for you. I live in the greater Valley Springs area, person to be exact, and I don't like what's going on with this rural, smart growth, community-based plan for Valley Springs. On the application to Caltrans for the grant by Calaveras Council of Governments, it is indicated that it is for the Greater Valley Springs area, and sub-recipients for the grant are County Community Development Agency, local government.
For ERA requires a 20% match. And part of the 20% match cannot be other federal grants. The Sheriff's Office, as you well are aware, has been very active and successful in receiving federal money. I want to assure the board that this will in no way compromise that effort. In fact, Captain Hawkins is part of our team, so he's up to date on all of our efforts. The intent is that we will actually complement whatever they're building, and at the same time develop some increased broadband access for the residents of Calaveras and Alpine, and hopefully Amador and Tuolumne counties as well. I've reached out to them, and I'm still waiting to hear back. My greatest hope is that both those counties will join as anchor tenants in the grant application, and if they choose not to do that, that at the very least they will write letters of support. That's actually why I'm here today. I'm asking for your support.
And the MyValleySprings.com Board of Directors, all 4 of them, and 6 members. The money from the grant, as stated, is to address the challenge that the project partners, whoever they are, envision a community plan for Valley Springs that will implement principles consistent with sustainable development, smart growth, and the new ruralism. That reminds me of the phony town hall meetings that I attended that were celebrating the birth of America in 1976, except they called it the New World Order. The community plan, according to the grant, will even address the need for physical activity to address the obesity epidemic, the government's way of telling us that they will monitor what we eat and how we exercise. I didn't think that too many people in this particular area really had an idea of what the Calaveras Council of Governments had in mind for our community with that grant and subsequent community plan. But they're becoming more and more informed, and they're angry, and they're protesting. I found it a little strange that an agent from ACOM, a global environmental management organization, was present when COG held a town meeting in Valley Springs. When checking ACOM out on the internet, it leads to several other international companies, all with the same goal: sustainable development, smart growth, and so on. We are to think globally, plan regionally, and even have inequitable distribution of economic resources. Oh, speaking of resources or economics, what is the global farce going to cost us? One of them, International Council for Local Government Initiatives, ICLEI, has on its website the Local Agenda 21 Planning Guide, the very same name as the United Nations Agenda 21 Planning Guide. I think that you, as supervisors, have a duty to protect the citizens of Calaveras County from deception from outside sources, and that COG and its agents have some explaining to do to the people in Calaveras County. They know perfectly well where all this planning, sustainable development, and smart growth is coming from. They're just hiding the truth. I suggest that in order to save the taxpayers' money, some of those agencies with those unelected bureaucrats should be dismissed. They're nothing but troubles. As for your duty, I have something else to add to that. If someone came to the county wanting a permit to sell snake oil, wouldn't you want to know what snake it came from? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Morning, Board of Supervisors. Nice to see your bright and shiny faces this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Valentine.
This is a statement to the Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Valentine, could you please...
It's in regards to the Greater Valley...
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Oh, all right. I wrote it down. Okay, I'm Andy Valentine. I'm in District 5, and I'm a homeowner in Rancho Calaveras.
Thank you.
Do you need more?
No, that's
Okay.
good enough.
In regards to the Greater Valley Springs plan promoted by the CCOG and myvalleysprings.com, their actions regarding public participation has been less than open. Numerous requests for a financial statement, not a budget, and disclosure of how the $255,000 of transportation grant monies are being spent have been made with no results. Today I am making a formal request for a complete financial statement from CCOG and/or My Valley Springs, as this is public taxpayer money. We, the people, have a right to know how these monies are being spent. If the pizza, chicken sandwiches, cookies, and the cookie vote are indicators of spending, I can understand why the financial disclosures are not being made public. I am also concerned about the wording of the public transportation grant and how it is being explained and presented at the charrettes and stakeholders.
And I'm hopeful that you'll allow the board chair to work with me to write a letter stating the board's support for this application process.
Any comments from the board on this? Questions to Mr. Stolman? Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, I will just give my opinion. I want to make sure that we do this properly. As I understand, this is a ministerial act to simply allow administration to go forward and do this. But I would assume also that when there is a proposal, a draft proposal, that will come to the board for formal action.
In the process in Copperopolis, we came up with distinctly separate communities that had separate characteristics, like we have in Valley Springs, and the Copperopolis Community Plan is a plan that contains many separate, distinctly different communities within a community of Copperopolis, and that's what I visualize happening in Valley Springs area. We've got the director of planning that just walked into the room, and I think that he will confirm what I'm telling you, that as it presently stands, the Rancho Calaveras special plan and the hierarchy of plans could, this Board of Supervisors and any subsequent Board of Supervisors could change the special plan in a general plan update 3 times a year. However, if it were protected with specific verbiage within the Valley Springs, the future Valley Springs community plan, with protections, with the appropriate protections, it would be much less vulnerable to encroachment of the commercial that all of us seem to fear. It would be less vulnerable, completely immune to high-density housing that some fears have been expressed. I want you to listen to me carefully. I have no desire to change anything about the Rancho Calaveras area. And if can anybody raise their hand and say that you've actually called and talked to me about this? No. I'm here to tell you that my objectives for Rancho are the same as yours. I don't want to change anything there.
On the other hand, if you called and asked
Doris, you threw me out of a meeting when I wanted to come to talk.
Don't get in an argument. Don't do that.
It was an informational
This
meeting.
conversation can be discussed later. Thank you very much. Supervisor Walensky, you had a comment to make.
Yes, I too wish to try to respond to the various sentiments that have come before this board. It is obviously not my district, and we tried to handle our processes in District 2, however awkwardly, at least with as much participation as we could have, and when we had disagreements, we tried to do something that is actually common in a democracy, although I find it somewhat absent in this dialogue. We actually voted. When different people felt they had a majority sentiment one way or another, and it turned out that there was more than one group that felt that it represented a majority. In a democracy, we usually decide to have a neutral arrangement, not one party or another holding the election, but some kind of a neutral process in which people can make a determination that everybody can then move forward on. That may involve inclusion or exclusion from a plan. It may mean some, for us, we resolved that early by votes, and most of our discussions and disagreements were on the content of proposed plans, which I think it would be a good idea in this late date to move from process to actual content. Because if I were living in that area, I would certainly have a lot of issues I'd want to see addressed in content, some of which might be to preserve things that we treasure, and some things might be to change things that are annoyances or true dangers to public safety or right-of-way or water, sewer, and other issues. These are not easy, and we, in a democracy, never all agree, I would hope. If we ever do, I'd say it's because we lost the diversity of information sources that a democracy requires to get properly informed. But this has become way too personal and too process-driven. We need a process that could be agreed by all factions to make a determination about a particular question that is holding up the discussion of content. So I have no say in that, but I do believe the people in this audience represent different stakeholder groups and different interests within Valley Springs, and that it would be my best recommendation and hope that people could get together after this meeting, sit down in your full diversity, across lines of process dispute, and come up with a venue in which to resolve this particular difference, and then move on. But get something you can agree on in a vote. I mean, everybody's got a petition, everybody's got a survey, everybody's got proof of their majority status. But we have yet to have the real kind of neutral, third-party, agreed-upon, secret ballot vote that most of us are familiar with in settling disputes in a democracy. Anyway, that's my hope. It's my recommendation. But again, it's other people's jurisdiction. I wish you the best.
All right, I am going to close public comment unless someone has an item.
I would like to give a comment from the board.
Just a minute. Unless someone has an item that is not addressed to the Valley Springs Community Plan.
I just wanted...
Unless you have something that is not on the Valley Springs Community Plan, you'd like to come up. Mr. Thomas had the right to make his comments. The public had the right to make their comments. Mr. Walensky did. Mr. Tryon would like to make a comment, and I'd like to move on with the meeting. Tom?
I'll give a brief comment, because basically the other board members have, so maybe it's time for the board to speak out on the issue. Basically, it's interesting that all of you are showing up here at the Board of Supervisors meeting when the Board of Supervisors really hasn't had anything to do with this process. This has been totally a council of government process. None of you elect directly the board members to the Council of Governments. They're appointed by the the city council, there's appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and appointed by, then those individuals appoint 3 members of the public at large. So there is very little community input into the governing body of the COG. I have been a strong voice, I guess, of dissent on how the COG is governed. I don't think it's governed properly. I don't think you can have 2 masters. Quite frankly, everything that the COG has done holds no force of law. It's just a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, and we have not yet, as a board, even initiated any investment to be made in the Valley Springs community plan. We have not held one study session on it. We have not held one meeting with the citizens of Valley Springs over what the Valley Springs community plan should look like, what the boundaries should be, anything. I think it's absolutely wrong for the COG. If the COG gets a grant like this, the COG should use that grant money and contract with the county building, or planning department to do the community plan for Valley Springs, because only the Board of Supervisors can adopt it. The COG board can't adopt a community plan for Valley Springs. I would say the same thing when it comes to circulation elements and these community, what do you call them? Circulations where the COG goes out and gets grants from Caltrans, and why Caltrans is giving them to the COG is beyond my comprehension. And then they run out in the community and do all the circulation and don't even involve Public Works. And it means nothing, because having the COG board vote on it has no force of law. Only the Board of Supervisors vote on adopting something will have a force of law, and we have to go through the public hearing process. So, quite frankly, where your voices should be heard is at the COG. They're the ones that did this to you, although I think your voices should be heard, in my opinion, to the Board of Supervisors for allowing this governance process that the COG is currently under to go forward. And this board can change that governance process, and I would be a strong advocate, and always have been a strong advocate, that the board do change that governing process for the COG board. But I'm very frustrated to listen to what's going on here and realize that...
Absolutely. And with that understanding, I would support it.
The letter can be done and then it can be put on consent agenda.
Yeah, time is of the essence. As with round 1, we actually have 7 weeks left to put all of the application together and get it submitted. So it's a very quick process.
So what Mr. Stallman's asking is, if the board is in agreement, we will put something together and put it on the board agenda for 2 weeks. It'd be a letter, 2 or 3 weeks, whenever we can do that, a letter of support. Is there concurrence to do that?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, Howard, we will be in touch. Thank you very much.
Can we make it 2 weeks, not 3 weeks?
I'll make it whenever he's ready.
Howard, is that 2 weeks fine?
It's whenever he's ready. I don't care whether
That's what I
it's
was
2 or
asking,
3.
Madam Chair.
Doesn't matter. We have
That's not
7
time
weeks.
is up there.
7 weeks.
The contractor we have hired to do the general plan and the community plan, none of these people have had any involvement in this process. And it's absolutely, in my opinion, absurd. The other one on the circulation is referred to as the mobility plans. And the last one we had come before us was the San Andres mobility plan. And the COG board adopts it. I think I was the sole no vote. And it's like, well, what are we doing? I mean, the COG board's adoption means nothing, and the citizens walk out thinking something's happened. All the COG can do is make a recommendation to the county, and the county's had no process, and the product that the COG is recommending, and yet the citizens think something's actually been done. And now the county has to come back in and do, or try to do, a community plan for Valley Springs when all the citizens are already divided and agitated and worked up? And what does that leave the county as a starting point? Quite frankly, I don't think, the county has no obligation at all to accept anything, any work that the COG has done. I'd like to just end then briefly with talking to Tom Emphysimo's comment on planning. And, we're all for planning. But it's one thing to say that the government should impose a plan over the private plan of the individual that owns the property. I mean, the individual that owns the property does his planning too. What Tom basically is saying is that planning should be vetoed, and the planning of government, whether it be smart growth or dumb growth or
Mr. Emphysimo, I am the chair of the
average
board.
IQ growth should be imposed. So it's a question of who's doing the planning, and you can have a plan be adopted, and you can certainly have a different idea of what the plan should be that is equally valid, but it gets basically decided, if not by the citizens in a whole, at least in representative government, and by the representatives the citizens have elected. So, I guess it sort of comes down to whose ox is getting gored and whose plan is being adopted. But just because it's somebody else's plan doesn't mean you don't have a plan, or that there aren't alternative plans. So
I am calling a 5-minute recess. Thank you. I am calling a 5-minute recess. Thank you. And then we will go to item 8A.
She can't be trusted with her choice.
Move to item 8A, please. This is the one where we
8A.
voted on?
That's right, 8A.
Thank you.
This is 8A?
On the, yes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, here's a couple
This is the one by CCWB?
No.
And thank you for waiting patiently as our public comment persisted.
Thank you. Good morning to the board. My name is Rochelle Whiting. I'm a sergeant with the Sheriff's Department, currently assigned to the Office of Emergency Services. And I'm here today to ask for your guys' support in passing a resolution proclaiming a local state of emergency in Calaveras County due to the effects of the storm starting on January 20th. As you know, the effects of the storms that hit the county with the increased precipitation and potential and almost flooding in Valley Springs, moving to heavy snowfall, many downed trees over the roadways and into structures, and power lines down and loss of power to the county, as well as access to many areas of the county became restricted due to the heavy snowfall. This greatly impacted many local agencies from the Sheriff's Department, Office of Emergency Services, the Water District, Public Works, many of the local fire districts, onto CAL FIRE, CDC, Caltrans, as well as other agencies like PG&E that were working hard in our area. Damage assessment is still forthcoming. It's expected new damage is going to come in. A lot of the homes that were affected in the upper areas of the county are vacation part-time homes, so we're working on damage assessment at this time. The reason this is before you today is because we have 10 days retroactive starting at the start of the storms on the 20th to get this filed, and this starts to help further the process for reimbursement claim to state or federal officials. So.
Okay, are there any questions? Michelle from the board. Are there any public questions or comments on this issue? The sergeant was working all weekend up in Ebbets Pass, and we appreciate what you did in getting notice out to the public, too. Thank you.
Yeah, I specifically like to thank you, Chair Calloway, for your help in coordinating services, as well as Mr. Tuffanelli down at Valley Springs and helping with the sandbag locations throughout the week. Thank you all.
I'll entertain a motion on this resolution.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you very much, Sergeant. Okay, I'd like to move to item 9. the boundary line adjustment for Edward G. Robinson, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture.
Like that.
You do conduct education forums. Thank you.
Oh, good morning, Chair Callaway, members of the board, Mary Motz, Agricultural Commissioner. I have two boundary line adjustments for you this morning, but the first one, Edward Robinson and Robert Garibaldi submitted an application to the county surveyor for a boundary line adjustment. Mr. Robinson's land is restricted by a Williamson Act contract, and therefore the county surveyor cannot go forward with any of his recordings of maps and finalizations of this boundary line adjustment until the board makes the 7 findings which are required when land is restricted by contract. So Mr. Robinson owns over 100 acres of land that are restricted. Now, Mr. Robinson and Mr. Garibaldi are requesting this boundary line adjustment to compensate for an easement. Mr. Garibaldi wanted a 20-foot easement across Mr. Robinson's land to accommodate a water line. In exchange for this easement, Mr. Garibaldi is going to give Mr. Robinson 2 acres. And so they need to do a boundary line adjustment so that this 2 acres can be melded into the larger parcel. And that is the reason for this boundary line adjustment today. But before we even do anything, we must review the 7 findings that are required. But I forgot to say, when all is said and done, after the surveyor records all the maps, I will come back again in the near future, and I will have a request from Mr. Robinson to rescind his current contract and simultaneously enter into a new contract, and it'll include those 2 new acres. But that will be in the future after all this is done. So let's review the 7 findings and get the boundary line adjustment approved. Finding number 1. The new contract will restrict the land for at least 10 years. Finding number 2, there will be no net decrease in the amount of land that's restricted. In fact, there will be 2 additional acres. Finding number 3, 100% of the land under the original contract will go into the new contract. The state law requires that 90% of the land go in contract. Finding number 4 is the new parcel will be large enough to sustain its agricultural use. The state code says that parcels have to be at least 40 acres for non-prime land, and this one will be over 50. Finding number 5, this lot line adjustment will not have any negative impact on the agricultural productivity of this parcel or on any other adjacent land that's under contract. And number 6, the lot line adjustment won't result in the removal of any agricultural land in the vicinity. And number 7, it does not result in more developable parcels. The Ag Advisory Committee met November 10th, 2009, and recommended that the board accept these findings and authorize the boundary line adjustment for Mr. Robinson and Mr. Garibaldi. So Supervisor Callaway, if there's any questions, I will handle them. Otherwise, I'm seeking approval of a resolution authorizing boundary line adjustment 0927 for Mr. Robinson and Mr. Garibaldi.
Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions or comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board. Mr. Walensky, this is in your area.
Yes, it is. Farmer Rancher Robinson is a venerated member of the District 2 family, runs his farm beautifully, and this is very appropriate. It's part of his generosity in relation to his neighbors. So with that, I would move to approve a resolution that approves the boundary line and its accompanying 7 findings.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5 vote. Thank you. The next one. Go ahead.
Okay, another boundary line adjustment. Patricia McCarty and the Meridian Gold Company submitted an application to the county surveyor for a boundary line adjustment. Patricia McCarty's land is restricted by a Williamson Act contract. And as I said earlier, the county surveyor cannot go forward and do any of his business, any of his work that's required until the board makes those 7 findings that are required. The McCartys own at least 800 acres of land restricted by a contract. The McCartys and the Meridian Mine Company request this boundary line adjustment to accommodate a diversion ditch. It appears that there is some diversion ditch on McCarty's property, and the mine's runoff goes through this diversion ditch. Now, I would understand why the McCartys would not want this diversion ditch on their property with all of those state regulations on water and runoff. So what they want to do is do a boundary line adjustment so this ditch will go on the mine property, and the mine in turn will give the McCartys 30 acres over here, which it would be grazable land. So if this is approved, the surveyor will be able to do all of his recordings and the maps will be...
So whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
Time is of the essence.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Yes.
Good morning. Brian Moss, Administrator of Environmental Management. Just a quick update for the board. We suffered some damage to our ag barn last week, and what I am having passed out to you for your information is some photos of what we found when the ridge cap blew off of the old barn. That's behind our HR department. Our best guess is that this occurred on January 20th. We discovered it on January 21st. There was minor damage done to our spray truck. That's being assessed at Public Works right now. And also all of the products and such that we have in the barn have been moved aside. So even though we've got a hole in the roof, we're surviving. Fortunately, the board has approved and brought us forward to a new Ag and Weights and Measures facility downtown and offices. So our our Weights and Measures.
And new assessor parcel numbers are provided. I will come back again in the near future with a request to rescind and re-enter into a new contract for the McCartys. But we have to do the 7 findings again. So number 1, the new contract will be at least...
Just a minute, Mary. Could you... Thank you, Mr. White. Please proceed.
Thank you. The new contract will be for at least 10 years. Finding number 2, there will be no net decrease in the amount of acreage restricted. Finding number 3, 96% of the land under the original contract will be in the new contract. The state law requires 90% of the land, so we're at 96%. Finding number 4, the parcel will certainly be large enough to sustain agricultural use. It will exceed the 40 acres that's required in the state code. Finding number 5, the lot line adjustment will not compromise any agricultural productivity on the parcel or on any other adjacent land under a contract. 6th finding, the lot line adjustment will not remove any agricultural land from production. And number 7, this lot line adjustment does not create more developable parcels. Again, the Ag Advisory Committee met on November 10th, 2009, recommended that the board accept these findings and authorize the boundary line adjustment for McCarty and Meridian Mine.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any questions or comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board. Mr. Thomas?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'm pleased to make a motion to approve this resolution authorizing the boundary line adjustment subject to the 7 findings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I'd like to move to item 11.
Good morning again. What's before you is a change in policy, actually, where we've revised our internet use agreement that was initially done in 1998. So as the date shows, it was a little outdated. And as you're aware, a couple of years ago, County Council was before you approved an electronic document retention policy. So as we set forth rewriting the acceptable use agreement, it became apparent that we wanted to combine the two. So that's what's before you today. This policy has been vetted to all the department heads, and as often occurs, there was some last-minute language revisions that serve to strengthen the policy. I can go through those if you wish, but essentially they just take out some redundant language, and in one case, instead of you should be aware, it's a shall, so it strengthens the policy somewhat. But most of them were either a typo or some redundant language changes, and I'm happy to go through those if you wish. Otherwise, you should have the newest policy before you now.
Are there any questions, or would you like Mr. Stallman to go through any of the changes?
Did the county council review the changes?
County council...
Initiated the changes?
No, the county council is aware of the changes and concurs.
That's correct. Howard worked with David Sirius on this document.
Steve?
I've mentioned this before, but because we have a new CAO, I'd like to say it again. When we move from one policy to another policy, it's very helpful for this supervisor to see it in a cross-out. What's new, what's been deleted, what specific changes are we making? It's just a lot easier format to be able to make these considerations. On something like this, which I take as a pretty significant issue, becoming more so as you described, I think that would be even more important. Now, I've had a chance to review it, so it's not germane to this particular consideration, but I would ask that, if possible, that we have a protocol that departments that are coming up with these would provide it in that format, just as a general practice here. Then I wanted to also just ask you a few questions about the resourcing issue that you alluded to in the narrative for the agenda item. This is taking more and more time. You can hear this kind of giant sucking sound, and which is not the aforementioned Ross Perot's invention, but he did mention that in those days. But for me, getting a handle on this and not leaving it to fate, but having a clear plan as to how we have a protocol or a policy now, but we don't have a way to live up to it if we do not resource it appropriately. I think that's pretty much the hint. It was more tea leaves, but it was actually kind of more like possibly a 2x4 over the head. But we do need to come up with a way to pay for the increasing number of requests, to manage it in a way that doesn't bankrupt the county, but also lives up to our obligation to share information. And I think the reconciliation of that needs to be part of our next budget round. I don't see us dealing with it now, but I don't see us ignoring it this next time out. And I'd like to hear more from you on how you see that developing and what you see as the resource demand as it, say, goes for the next 5 years. There's clearly a trajectory here.
There is a trajectory, and thank you for taking note of my, I guess you called it a 2x4. As we go forward, we receive more and more requests for public records, and each of those requests has to be addressed, one by county council, and then two, the department where the data resides, and then three, tech services, who is now responsible to pull it all together. There's a time frame to answer public records requests, and an ever-increasing time frame to address administrative responses to courts. They just expect that in a technology era that we will use technology to produce the requests, and the fact that we don't have it in place doesn't make the rule go away. I would estimate that we should estimate that we will be investing between $50,000 and $75,000 in hardware-software combination to help the county fulfill its obligations in the future. That is obviously a lot of money, but it will be a savings in staff time, but it will also be a savings perhaps to the county in litigation expenses. As I'm not a legal expert, and Mr. Sirius is here to address those questions, but as I understand it, failure to address an administrative request by court within a time frame specified by the court can result in automatic loss of your case. So if you were presenting a case that was worth $1 million to the county and you didn't address their request in a timely manner, that in and of itself could cost you the entire case. So it is kind of one of those risk management decisions where, it's obviously a lot of money to go forward, but it will, one, save staff time, but two, could save the board and the county considerable resources going forward.
Can you give us some idea of what other rural counties have done in relation to this? Are they all in place?
No, they're not in place. They're kind of where we are. And actually, some larger counties are in the same place. It's, again, an expensive proposition to move forward with this. A lot of the administrative findings by the court are relatively new. In fact, there's some even brand new ones coming out for CEQA. So, they continue to change on a monthly basis, and we'll need to be in a position to address those in the very near future, as will other counties as well.
All right, thank you. That's it for me.
Are there any other questions in this class?
Howard, it sort of piques my interest when you say that there are other counties that are in this similar position. I don't have this particular software backing up my information on my computer, but I hear things about carbonite and these off-site stuff. And does it make any sense to enter into some sort of a mutual agreement with some of our nearby counties to buy one set of hardware off-site that all this data could be stored in? And I don't really see the wisdom of having 7 counties invest $75,000 if it could be handled in a situation where you'd have some servers that just have to be augmented.
It's definitely worth exploring. I'm not prepared to specifically answer your question today, but as we go forward, that
lab is not affected as it would have been before. So anyway, that is the bottom line. I just wanted to let the board know about this, and it has been turned over to risk management. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Tom Infacino. I'm here on behalf of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. I want to make a few points today about planning because it seems to be getting a black eye over the last few weeks. First, I want to emphasize that planning is a valuable part of both private and public enterprise. Harvard did a study about its graduates, and they found that 1 out of 5 Harvard graduates had a plan for their career. When they revisited those graduates 20 years later, they found that the 1 out of 5 that had a plan for their career advanced faster in their career and made more money than their unplanning counterparts. Intel, one of the most successful software companies.
I'm definitely for an economy of scale solution. Part of it is the data that lives on our existing file servers and our email server and other servers throughout the county. So we actually need the solution, or whatever we decide. We need it to be here. Offsite backup and retrieval may help us, but there will be a component that has to be here, even if we invest in some offsite backup and their retrieval process for us.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the public? I'd like to bring the item back to the board for action. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Please come up.
Good morning, barely. Colleen Platt from Valley Springs. Just as a member of the public trying to read this electronic media storage as relates to public records and as relates to how we deal with the staff and information and retention of information. Just had this for a few days. It's hard to get through all this, 14 pages, but I just had some questions that possibly Howard or planning or somebody...
Ask the questions, and then when every comments are made, I'll get back to Mr. Stolman.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, there's no page number. Under the public records, number 11, it talks about information transmitted by email that meets the definition of public record under the Public Records Act may not be deleted, and then it refers to attachment 1. I'm just wondering who makes the decisions here on, who's going to delete every email? Is each employee going to make that decision on an individual email basis, email by email? And then do they need to refer to attachment 1, which is the description of what a public record is, and it talks about an email message is generally considered to be a public record if it contains information relating to the conduct of the public's business. That seems like it's almost every email in the county if it relates to the conducts of public business, other than the exceptions listed below, which is spam, of course, commercial solicitation, or emails of a personal nature, which we can understand. Other than that, it seems like almost everything would be related to the public's business, so I'm just wondering how is the staff supposed to make these determinations? And then also underneath the other exclusions of public records, I'm kind of wondering about the exclusion of preliminary drafts and memos. Sometimes those come out to be quite important later on, and I'm wondering whether those should be excluded under public records, storage of public records. That's an exclusion listed below. That was generally my first question. The second question is on the policy of litigation hold procedure. I'm wondering, so this is a whole policy about...
Where are you?
I'm number 12. There's no
Okay,
page
thank you.
numbers. Okay. So number 12 on litigation hold procedure. It talks about the policy of whether something should be not deleted because it may be under pending or reasonably anticipated litigation. So they recommend suspending email deletion if that's a possibility. And I'm just wondering about the whole premise of that. Why is this even an additional policy needed if all email that's public record or that is relating to the conduct of the public business, if that's public records and that's going to be retained, why would you need a separate policy to decide whether it's going to be litigated or whether it's going to be controversial? It seems like this is adding another burden of decision on staff to make all these decisions on individual emails. So that's my second question. The third question goes to number 14, under public records requests. It states, department shall immediately notify county council or the director of technology services of any requests to produce copies of or provide access to electronic media or data. And I'm wondering, that sounds really broad. Does this mean that notification is required every time a citizen asks for, a planning department document, a project document, a map from planning? Every time I make a phone call or an email and say, could you update me with this map or this letter or something, does that require that person to notify county council or the head of technology every time that happens? That looks like an additional burden on staff time. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this all. This is just my first reading of the document, and those are the questions that come to mind.
It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Tom Infacino, Calaveras Planning Coalition. I'm going to repeat some of the things that Colleen said, but with a little slightly different emphasis. I, too, am concerned with the way that this policy will influence how planning documents are stored. First, though, I want to go to policy number 5, which talks about portable storage devices. One of the most efficient ways that we communicate now with staff if we have a document request is if we have to go into the desk and say, hey, I need this such and such a document. The first thing they do is see if it's in electronic format. The second thing they do is, do you have a flash drive? And you just hand your flash drive over, zoom, it's in the flash drive, it's done. My concern is that I think we need to work away that the policy number 5 requires the use of only approved portable storage devices, and non-approved portable storage devices cannot be used. And I want to make sure that this very efficient means of transferring information can continue. So if there's a way that the county can identify what the approved portable storage device is, we'll buy the right flash drive. We will. Just let us know so that we can continue to use this very cheap and effective way of moving information. The second one was policy 10 and 12 regarding email retention and the litigation hold. And this is what concerns me about emails being deleted within 60 days. As you know, planning procedures often may take 2 or 3 years to get from the application stage to the Board of Supervisors decision stage. And a lot of the communications involved are via email. And those are all part of the administrative record for that decision. A litigation hold, while a nice idea, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be there, that's only useful. You may not know about a threat of litigation until the late days of the project, 30 days or a week before you can make your decision. If county council at that time says, oh, by the way, don't delete any of those emails on this project, and they've been deleting them every 60 days for the last 3 years, you won't have that information to effectively preserved. The reason I bring this up is that the discussion of, well, we're not going to throw out public records is not quite sufficient to cover the issue. If you read what's considered part of the administrative record under CEQA, it includes, and I quote, all internal agency communications, including staff notes and memoranda related to project or to compliance with this division. So it's what's in an administrative record is a very broad item. So I'm concerned that the deletion every 60 days of emails may inadvertently destroy evidence that could be either crucial to your defense, could potentially be crucial to your defense in a CEQA action. So there's that. So I guess if we could reformulate that in a way where holding those kind of records becomes the rule rather than the exception to the rule, we probably would be better off. The next item is policy 14. Any request for records of electronic data should be reviewed by County Council. Now, if you look at the next item on your agenda, County Council also has a Public Record Act policy change, which is more liberal than that. It says if the request for electronic data is clearly exempt, is clearly a document that's public, can be responded to in 15 minutes, then County Council doesn't want that kind of a request going up to County Council's office. So I think if we could correct policy 14 to read the same as, I believe it's policy 2A in the next agenda item, everything will fit nicely. So I hope that didn't confuse you too much, but the last 2 pages, the next agenda item is County Council's proposal. And if we can get this agenda item to match that agenda item, we'll probably be better off. And then the last thing I want to mention is I think it's a good idea when deciding new records policies to take a look at what other jurisdictions are doing. And in this case, we have a lot to look at, not just not just within the state of California under the Public Records Act, but also under the Freedom of Information Act. And if we can look at how other people are trying to save money in their compliance with these acts. One of the things the federal government does is they've made it a policy to put more documents routinely on their website, so that you don't have requests constantly coming in for public records. People just get on the website, and there it is. Another good example is more locally here, is the city of Sutter Creek. On their recent planning documents, they put not only the public documents that the county generated in the planning process, they went and scanned written documents that the public had generated and electronic documents that the public had generated, and they put them on the county website. And I found that they use it very effectively. What they do is by publicizing what public concerns are regarding projects, they then use those in negotiating better development agreements with developers, and in the case of a recent project, generating millions of dollars in revenue for the city. So you might consider those kind of steps in making public information more readily public, and then you wouldn't have to deal with their requests on a case-by-case basis. If staff would like, I'd be happy to work with your technical services people or county council or planning to iron out these details regarding access to public records. Thank you.
Thank you.
With all due respect to the public, we thoroughly vetted this document. These documents are reconciled.
And a provider of jobs in the Sierra Foothills prides itself on its corporate planning procedures and finds that the planning that they do that involves their workers in each department is a major reason for their continued success. The second point I want to make is that land use planning is not new to the Sierras. John C. Fremont in 1849 and 1850 divided his land in what would become the town of Mariposa into a street grid pattern to facilitate commercial development on the main street and residential development in surrounding areas. That grid remains the core of the town of Mariposa today. The third point I want to make is that good planning can protect and enhance property rights and property values. When we purchase a home, the qualities of value are capitalized into that purchase price. People participate in planning for the future to ensure that those values like potable water, like flowing traffic, like clean air, and like sustainable jobs will continue into the future. As you all know, when the county concluded that funds were kind of tight regarding the general plan update process, the communities in San Antonio
here.
Could you just introduce yourself?
David Sirius, Assistant County Counsel. The public records policy that's coming after this blends with this policy. These are both legal documents. They're here for a reason. The reason that we have these documents is because of changes in the federal rules of civil procedure and changes to state law, which essentially mandate that counties have and cities have policies just like this, so that people like Howard have control and people like Jim Jones have control over litigation, subpoenas, over litigation discovery, and over public records requests. So we thought this through. Howard's policy says that these electronic requests for electronic documents shall be in coordination with county council. That's consistent with the other policy. The 60-day requirement is designed to make it easier for the courts. These policies are designed for the courts as they are as much for the public. No public record is going to be deleted. If there's a planning file or there's a document that has to go into a planning electronic file, it will go there. It will stay there as long as the substantive law governing how long planning can hold documents limits. So nothing important, no record, administrative record is going to be compromised. The 60-day requirement is more for the benefit of technology services and for discovery, so that when there is a discovery request or when there is a subpoena, we can narrowly and quickly figure out what it is that they're looking for, and anything that's unimportant will go away. That's what the 60 days is about. And the litigation hold, litigation holds have been around forever, and they will always be around. That's why he gets paid money. That's why I get paid money, to make those decisions as to what documents can and cannot go away. Howard, I think I'll let Howard discuss the flash drive issue because essentially that's also something that we addressed internally in terms of not compromising the system.
Mr. Series, I'm not sure all the questions have been answered. I think some of them would go to you. For example, number 11, which was who makes the decision on public records, on whether it should be deleted or disposed of? I mean, does the...
Who makes a decision on what is a public record?
No, the question was, a public record may not be deleted unless otherwise disposed of within the general guidelines. So
we're going to have a training. We've had public records training all along.
I understand.
We're going to have another training that's going to be more in line with what we're looking at under this policy. But generally, the general rule is that our department heads have a custodian. The custodian is responsible for determining what is and is not a public record. And if they have a question, they call us. It's a legal question. Public records are legal questions. That's why you need people like...
So, and I think the other issue is, does...
Reyes in District 2 and in Valley Springs stood up to the plate and have collected valuable public input for the county general plan, as had the good residents of Copperopolis years before. And all of those communities should be commended for their efforts. Finally, for those people who want to have a continued say, or a say for the first time in the community plan and general plan update processes, I have good news. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, this is not the beginning of the end of the general plan update. It's not even the end of the beginning. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at the chart on the wall. That's the timeline for the general plan update process. We haven't even reached the end of the beginning. So I know this is a difficult time for a lot of people. Nobody's thrilled with our national or local economies. People are very disenchanted with government in general right now, and they have every right to be angry. But I do encourage them, when that anger subsides, and when they're willing and able to make constructively participate in these update processes, I urge them to do so. Participate, participate, participate. Your democracy needs you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have an item not on the agenda? Okay, thank you. I'm going to be moving...
Just a moment, Madam Chairman. I would like to take this opportunity to make a general response to some of the comments that I've heard here in prior weeks and particularly today. I'd like to address my remarks specifically to Kiss and to Andy and to Doris and to Mickey and to Richard. The fact is that none of you have ever really asked me what my position on this Rancho versus not Rancho in the plan is. I went to a meeting one day, and I was hoping to share my thoughts on that. I've heard here repeatedly that the information is not forthcoming, that we're being too guarded in the dissemination of information. It's not for the want of trying. I went to that meeting hoping to express my sentiments on this issue of Rancho Calaveras. Now, I'd like for all of you to listen to my words carefully, because I live on a 2-acre parcel in Copper Cove subdivision in Copperopolis. It is very similar in that subdivision at 2,000 lots is very similar to the 3,600 lots in Rancho. I am keenly aware of the pride that all of the folks in Rancho have in their properties, because I'm equally proud of mine. Like you, I have CCWD water. I have a septic tank on my property that works just fine. I have no need for hooking up to the sewer. And I want to communicate to you that it is my desire to protect the rural character of Rancho Calaveras. Now, you have a special plan, and the special plan has been worked on by a good many of you that are sitting in the audience. But what I wanted to express to you on the day that I was not allowed to talk was that the special plan in the hierarchy of protections is actually pretty vulnerable. I honestly don't have the phrase is a dog in the fight necessarily, because I don't live in Rancho Calaveras, but it has always seemed to me that the protection for the rural character and the wonderful properties that and the lifestyle that you have in Rancho Calaveras would be much more protected if it were folded into the community plan. And I tried to express that
Does every request, if let's say it's 15 minutes or less, have to go to council's office, or can that be done?
That's my policy. That's in the next item. If I can address that in the next item.
Okay.
This has not, that question is more appropriate to the next item. Howard's policy is more in connection with electronic portion, not the actual requesting.
If Tech Services is saying departments shall immediately notify county council or the director of Tech Services of any request to produce copies, and somebody comes in and they want a copy of...
I don't think his policy says that, does it?
Yes, it does. It's a shall immediately notify to produce copies or access to electronic media or data. So that's saying, even if we do training, the policy from Tech Services is that all requests, Tech Services will be notified, or county council.
Or county council, correct.
Right, but if somebody comes in and it's a request that's probably frequently asked, and the clerk can do it.
And again, the way that we try to reconcile is that the way we try to reconcile it is under the
be others that can resolve these in the future.
So if you're in agreement with that suggestion that you'll make those flash drives available, that doesn't require a small change in the verbiage here? I mean, there's a prohibition of...
Well, I think there's some discretion in the wording that it says approved, and, those can be approved. Obviously, new poses no risk.
Okay, are there other questions of Mr. Stallman? I found that there were some things in here that were not clear, and I understand this is an internal document to give staff a roadmap of what they're to do or not to do. I'll support this, but I understand what council said. I still felt like there were things in there that were not clear to me as a staff member, so I think some of the questions that came up from the public could also be coming up from staff, county employees also. Okay, are there any other comments? All right, and the pleasure of the board, please.
Well, does staff feel they need any time to review the comments, or do you feel comfortable recommending that we go forward with the product in front of us?
I feel comfortable moving this item forward. I think there is some crossover onto your next item that will stand.
Well, I have an interest in both of these items, and the purpose of these are to be living documents as we get some experience if there are problems. I think they're good documents. The public records policy is our first effort at that, and I think it solves all the problems. But if as we get along we find there are some difficulties, we bring them back for further clarification. But I would ask that the board approve both of these documents.
Then I'll move this first document.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you,
Thank you.
Howard. Okay, move to item 12.
David Sirius, Assistant County Counsel. This County of Calaveras Public Act request policy, let me give you a little bit of background. I've been doing the training for public records for 15 years here. We generally do training every 2 or 3 years. We haven't had a formal training for department heads, maybe two years now. maybe 3. This document changes nothing. This is exactly what we've been telling departments for the last 15 years. But what has happened is that department heads, Steve, have been creating roadblocks because they're forgetting what the training was. They forgot what I told them. And so they started making mountains out of molehills. And so what we felt we needed to do was simply put what we've always done in writing. This changes procedurally, it changes absolutely nothing. We've always done the training according to this template, because I did it many, many years ago and have updated it with the law. So what the policy does now is simply memorialize in writing what the trainings have always reflected. And we're trying to eliminate the roadblocks such that when we get these simple requests, we just comply instead of having to. What would end up happening is the department heads would end up calling council or calling some other department head. How do you handle it? What does council do? I'm not there. There has to be a delay, and it would turn into this big deal when it was all they needed to do was mail it or email it, the response to the request. So it's short because that's really how it should be. So I recommend. Were there any questions? Were there any questions that related to this, Marita? Remind me.
The only question was what some people thought as some nuanced variance between the other document and this.
And the 60 days.
And the 60 days.
But essentially, it's all there in black and white, and we made it in as plain English as possible. We tried to take all the legalese out.
David, if somebody, and it usually happens in the building department, wants a copy of a building permit that was done or approved 5 years, 10 years, whatever ago, and they do it by fax, it's a public record, is there how do we charge for that? I mean, in fact, never mind.
Well, the way that it's written is if the document is right there and they can fax it right to them, then they just fax it right to them. We're not even going to charge for it unless the costs are significant.
Are there any questions of Mr. Seard? Are there any questions from the public or comments from the public on item 12?
Just to follow up on, if I may, to follow up on what David said, the controlling authority here is the Public Records Act itself. This policy does not have the force of law. It's just an attempt to summarize in a very simple way what the state law requires of us. And it's not intended to make any changes in our past process. It's not intended to make any difficulties for the routine documents. The departments, for years, they know what documents they have that are routinely requested, and they're produced without any difficulty. Nobody calls my office for advice on that. There's no purpose to it to change that procedure. So by and large, I think the departments know what documents they have that'll be readily produced. This really is intended to address the unusual situations that do come up from time to time. So again, I think this, as David said, is not a significant change in our past practices, but it is a way to reduce it to writing, which should help in training of the departments in the future. I'm mindful of Mr. Infacino's comment. I don't read that there's an inconsistency between these two policies. There's no purpose of having the routine request for documents come to my office before they're produced. If they're producible, they should be produced, and then notice as required by Howard's policy would follow that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Infosimo.
Yeah, I like this policy. I'm not having a problem with it. The reason I had a concern about the other one was it looks on its face that there might be a conflict. And if you read 14 and 15 together, it starts to get scary at some point, because in the previous one it said, the department shall immediately notify county council or the director of technology service of any request to produce copies or provide access to electronic media or data. The response to any such request shall be made in coordination with county council. And item 15 was violation of the policy, and violation of this policy may result in disciplinary action under the county code or any other applicable provision of local state law. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit might make one nervous if they're not aware of the other policy, which says go ahead, give it away. So that's the distinction I was trying to make.
And I think the staff appreciates that comment too. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this? Any from the board? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move the item, Madam Chair.
Second.
I have a motion, second by Supervisor Thomas. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you. I'd like to move to item 13, and we will take a break between item 14 and item 15.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. George White, Planning Director. The item before you is a request for a fee waiver from Tom Coe. Mr. Coe is a owner of one of the 15 active mines in Calaveras County, and he's requesting a waiver of the fee related to the annual mining inspection process that's required of the county by the state of California. And Mr. Coe is here today, and I think he'll present his own arguments to support his own request.
Policy, which under the other policy, which is simply writing down what we've always done. We want to know. We want to know if something electronic went out. So they notify us, but they have certain duties under the other policy.
Okay, but they can go ahead and fulfill the request and then notify you or tech services or however it's done.
Absolutely.
So all requests, you'd be notified, but they don't need permission to give. Every request does not need to be approved by you.
That's correct, Madam Chair. As I stated at the beginning, we've gone through both of these policies very, very, very closely, and we've read them both together extensively over the last several months.
I understand, but I think the issue is if it could be misunderstood, it could be misunderstood, and maybe it will be resolved, and because the users of this are county staff.
Yes, and we will train county staff accordingly.
Okay, so I just think those were fair concerns. And I'll let Howard do the flash drive.
The mining fees approximately a year and a half ago, as part of a comprehensive fee study and update for the then Community Development Agency. Up to that point, the mining inspection process that had been conducted in compliance with the state law was completely subsidized by the county. The fee is comprised of two parts. One is a $148 flat fee to cover the administrative costs, and the other is a deposit of $615 against which the actual cost of the inspection is charged, in other words, on a time and materials basis. I provided some additional background to the board and to Mr. Coe in a memo that's attached to the staff report. Because the fee is intended to essentially recover costs for work that's being done by the county in compliance with state law, for an applicant, whether they like that or not, I can't support the fee waiver. And therefore, the staff recommendation is to deny the fee waiver request, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about that recommendation.
Are there some questions of Mr. Wyatt?
I'll have questions, but after the presentation, if that's all right.
Thank you. Is there anyone, Mr. Coe, did you like?
Good morning. I'm Tom Coe. I'm a property owner and business owner here in Calaveras County, and I want to thank you for giving me your ear this morning. As Mr. White suggested, I'm here to seek a waiver of the newly imposed inspection fees that have been imposed on our mine. This morning I'm representing the Valley Springs Clay Pit, LLC. I'm the manager of that mine. And I submitted this request back in October,
And I wanted to ask you for a waiver of that fee for several reasons, and I'll get into that in more detail. Mr. White has subsequently attenuated some of that problem, but there are other related issues that I want to bring to your attention and discuss with you. I might say that I lost my train of thought here, excuse me. But I guess I'm asking you to respond similarly. I submitted the same letters, and maybe I should start here. I'd like to get into the record the letter I sent to you on October 3rd and also October 9th, and my letters to you January 12th. Their references and their enclosures. I don't want to read them into the record. I think you have that information before you, but the State Mining and Geology Board received a similar request for their newly imposed fees, as well as the Office of Mine Reclamation. They responded very quickly. They were very complimentary of my thoughts, and they have waived their newly imposed fees because of the economic conditions that exist here, which I appreciate. I'd like you to give similar consideration to some of this. There is some of the other related things that I want to get into, not necessarily in order of their priority, but we've had an ongoing problem here, and I'm talking to you as a businessman in this county, too, of some of the things that we're having to deal with that I think is inappropriately time-consuming for all of us. I've had we received this invoice addressed to a fictitious name that wasn't correct. We were operating initially as a I'm sorry. We converted our we were operating as a we were previously a limited partnership. We changed that, converted that partnership to an LLC in early 2001. And we recorded that change with your county recorder's office with all the appropriate documentation. And we've had to deal with this on a number of occasions that they continue to refer to us as a limited partnership, whereas we're in fact a limited liability company. And I understand from Mr. White that problem's been corrected now, which I appreciate, and I hope that's the case. I just want to bring that to your attention as more types of administrative problems we've been dealing with. We've also been addressed as an applicant on the invoice. And I take issue with that because we're certainly not the applicant. We might be the recipient, but we did not apply for these inspection fees, or this inspection we're being charged the fees for. Now, I understand now that we're going to be charged on a time and material basis on this. Mr. White has indicated that your billing rate is, if I correct, $40 an hour? Yeah. And so I understand that we are potentially, though I haven't seen it, I'd like clarification that I understand we're going to be charged for 2 hours of inspection, as yet when the records only indicate that there was 15 minutes devoted to this inspection. I don't understand that, but and then the $148 administrative fee, that might be appropriate. I'm not sure yet. I've got some more information about that I want to talk about. The other thing that I want to ask you about that's been problematic is getting on your agenda. I made a request in October, early October, in writing to get on your agenda for this purpose. The same request went out to the state board, and I got a response back from them within a week. I was on their agenda within a week and a half. And then a week later, they called me and they told me that they were waiving these fees, and I didn't need to attend that meeting, which I appreciate. Here, I was told I had to get myself on the agenda myself. I went to the recorder's office, county recorder's office. They told me I can't put myself on the agenda. It has to be done by one of the state or the county agencies or a supervisor. Mr. Tofinelli and I appreciate his efforts in getting me involved here, but I don't know why it's taken so long to get on your agenda to resolve this issue.
Tom, I want to address that just a moment, because I take a little bit of issue. You're taking issues with this board and the county. I take issues with some of this letter that you've written in this particular item that you're bringing up now. I've worked with you extensively, and so has George White, over the course of the last couple of months to resolve this issue before it came to the board. We were hoping to not end up at this point. And there was a lot of work done by George and a lot of contact with George and yourself, albeit there was holidays in between, that there was vacation time taken and there was time that was not unavailable. But I've worked with you many times over the phone and in person on getting this issue resolved, and then it came to the point where George was going to issue a letter not only to you but other mine owners on this specific issue where the fees were going to be reduced from a flat fee to actual time. And so we were waiting for your response from this letter that George had sent out. And there wasn't time the last meeting that was supposed to be on that agenda, which I told you. But then it was taken off because there was no response at the time that we needed to know between that agenda and this agenda. So I got you on this very next agenda because you took expense to that. Yeah. But I don't appreciate it in this letter being the way it's written, that it's taken so long to get to this point, because that's not entirely true. There's been a lot of meetings going on between yourself, this department, and this supervisor, and I think this supervisor also on this specific issue. So,
well, I appreciate that, Mr. Tofinelli, but I'm just talking about collectively the whole issue being dragged out this long. I know that individuals and yourself and Mr. Thomas have been helpful in this area, but it's just been protracted, and it's over a long period of time.
Well, I think part of the issue is, and I'm going to speak a little bit here about why it may seem that it took so long to get to this point, because you brought to light an issue that had some validity to it. And it wasn't specific to yourself. It was specific to the other 15 active mines in the county. And so the investigation into what you brought to light took some time. Like I said, there was vacation times involved. There was holidays involved over that period. There was times where this board did not meet for periods of time. The last half of December, there were no board meetings. We didn't have a board meeting for the last 2 weeks. So there a lot of different things played into that issue.
Well, I'm sorry if my comments have been offensive, but they've been meant to be constructive in their nature. So, the other thing that I have a concern about, and I'm not sure, I'm under the impression that this whole inspection fee, might be in violation of Article 13D of the California Constitution. And I want to address that. I understand.
Okay, I think the 60-day one also was not clear. Okay. Howard?
The flash drives pose a external flash drives pose a security risk to the county's network. I've heard, I've not confirmed, but have no reason to doubt that The Department of Corrections is now actually searching employees for flash drives as they report to work. They've had some virus issues come in where employees plug in a flash drive into a state, in our case, county computer, and instantly transfer a virus onto the county system. So we're trying to prevent that from occurring. The other thing with flash drives is they're very portable, I would agree, and they're a very convenient way to transfer data. They're also very small and often misplaced. So our recommendation would be for an encrypted, password-protected flash drive. That way, they would be...
That we were to receive written notice by mail of these proposed fees, and not after a public meeting is described and requested by paragraph 6, I'm sorry, section 6, paragraph 1. And there was also be a public hearing of these proposed fees, not less than 45 days after the mailing of the notice of proposed fees to the affected owners as described and requested by this paragraph section. I'm an owner, and we received no written notice of these fees. Do you know why we didn't receive a notice? And was there a hearing associated with these fees?
Yes, there was a hearing. It was public process. It's always a public process when we do anything with fees.
I did not receive a mailing notice, though, and this requires a mailing notice to the people that are affected.
Okay. I can't address that. We'd have to go back and look, but...
And then I was curious as whether these imposed fees are in conformance to each of the regulations described and required by Section 6, Paragraph 2B. There's quite a list of various things that this has to be in conformance with, and I don't believe that they are. I don't know if you want to get into this here or if this should be taken offline. So.
Okay, go ahead with your comments, and we'll ask Council and Mr. White to address them.
Okay. I do want to thank you for your continuing support. Well, there's probably another issue I should bring to your attention. We have been blessed, not only our company, but this county and Calaveras County, or Calaveras Cement, discovered this deposit of over 9 million tons of clay in our county. It's quite a resource potential for us individually and collectively as a group in a county. Well, you heard a little bit more. I think we were concerned about the potential storm and the snow melt that we're going to be experiencing. There's some exposure to flooding in the San Joaquin Valley and the Delta region. There's been some concern about restructuring these levees, and we're a candidate. Our material is a candidate for supporting those levees. And if we have to close this mine because we can't afford to maintain it, it would probably, as I've addressed in my letters, it would be very problematic to ever reopen it if we could. So I think you need to understand, I know that there's, I guess, 15 other mines in this county that are subject to these fees. I don't know how many of them are productive, but our pit has not received any revenue from clay for over 3 years right now because of the nature of the economy and some of the things that are going on. Actually, we did have a sale just recently subsequent to my letters and my appeal. It's just a minor sale, but it did occur. We'd like to keep this as a viable economic opportunity for the county. I addressed this in my letter just to refresh you. This has got the potential of providing a revenue stream into our economy of over $58 million. We're able to exploit this deposit. 13 million of that we could use towards the development of the Coast Center and what we're trying to accomplish there. And I would like to continue to solicit your support in the development of the Coast Center. I think that the state has given some recognition of the fact that some of these mines are in a dormant state because of the economy, and that there isn't a current market for these materials. And I'd like you to give that consideration as you're considering our request for a waiver of these fees until some point in time we become a productive mine. I think some of these mines I know are paying the fees, but perhaps they're in an economic situation to do that. We have, this isn't a lot of money, and I appreciate that, but our family has been putting in several $1,000s a year to pay the taxes on this, to pay the insurance. We're having to, now the state's requiring us to have an annual update on our reclamation plan. We have to hire a solicit a qualified engineer to come in and do that for us at significant cost. Then we have to post a bond for those requirements, and it's becoming encumbering. This is just, again, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I would appreciate your help and consideration in doing this until we start receiving some income from this operation. I think that concludes my thoughts. If you have any questions.
Tom, I got a couple questions for you. One, do you own any mines in any other counties?
No.
It's the only mine that you own?
Pardon me?
It's the only mine that you own?
Currently, yes. I've had mining operations in other states and counties.
You have?
Yes.
Have you researched what other counties in California their fees are for this specific item?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? I've done a little research myself in preparation for this. And I looked up just on the internet. I didn't call to ask any planning departments what their fees were, but I did some post them their fee schedules on the internet. And I was able to look at several of them. Stanislaus County's one, their mine inspection fee is a flat fee of $760. Amador County is, well, you got to call them on the phone, so I didn't call them. El Dorado County is $1,000 flat fee. Nevada County, $1,196.26. Plumas County is $274 plus $25 an acre. Butte County, $692, between $692.75 and $2,771, depending on the size of the mine. Shasta County is $662 for an active mine, and an idle mine, they charge $358. And those are just a few of the counties surrounding us here in Northern California and their mine inspection fees. So the fees that you received a bill for, as I'm looking at other counties adjacent to us, is pretty well in line if it stayed as a flat fee to which you were sent. However, I think George is going to speak on a reduction of those fees and actual costs. So,
yeah, as I understand our Constitution, I was talking about earlier that these, the amount of a fee charged imposed upon any parcel or person as an incident of property ownership shall not exceed the proportional cost of the service attributed to the parcel.
And I think George is going to speak to that after you sit down. I think George will speak on that. Then you can have some of your closing comments if you want. But I thought it was interesting to find out what other counties here in Northern California charge for the exact same thing that this fee was imposed on.
I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coe. Are there any other public questions or comments before I ask Mr. White to address the issues? Okay, thank you. Mr. White?
What did you want to address first?
I'll let Gary take the lead. I think
thank you, Madam Chair. George, I know you and I have spoken. I know you and Tom have spoke, and I don't know if Supervisor Thomas and you have spoke, although he's been involved with some of the communications. when this initially came to light, when the first letter addressed on October 3rd came, you and I had a conversation, and I instructed you to look into the concerns, because I think there was like 3 or 4 mine owners that had basically the same concern, that these were astronomical fees. And so you did that, and I guess you can start off by what you found out and what you came decision upon.
Yeah, to roll the tape back, when I arrived here in June of last year, there was a fee on the books for this mining inspection process that had not been implemented, even though it had been adopted the previous summer by the board. Up to that point, as I said before, there was no such fee, and that work was completely subsidized by the county. So taking what I saw on the fee schedule that had been prepared by the Community Development Agency, which is now the Planning and Building Departments separately, we sent out invoices to all the different mine owners, and there are 15 active mines in Calaveras County, letting them know that we intended on implementing that fee and that we would provide the service, which was the inspection itself.
Do you remember the date of that mailing?
I don't remember the date, but it was probably sometime in July or August. It might have been before that. I'm not really sure. Subsequently, we did get a couple of objections, though 12 out of the 15 mine owners actually just paid the fee without any further conversation. Mr. Coe was one of the mine owners, and there were 2 others. Mr. Coe was the only one of the 3 that actually decided he wanted to ask for a fee waiver. As you said, you had asked me about how this fee had been established, and essentially try to formulate some response to the objections or the concerns that have been raised. So what I did is I went back and looked at the records related to the fee study that was done for the Community Development Agency back in 2007 and 2008.
Issued by the county, and we would not allow personal flash drives to be plugged into the county equipment. They would have a password assigned to them. That way, if they're lost, whoever happens to find them would not be able to retrieve the documents located on it. Remember that it's not only planning documents that end up on those drives. It's sometimes very sensitive data, Sheriff's Department data, narcotics data, that kind of stuff that finds its way to those devices occasionally. So we have had them misplaced. So we want to make sure that the county is as best protected as it can be. That said, I can work with the planning director on developing a protocol where we can transfer information to whomever's requesting it via those devices. We're also happy to burn CDs and DVDs. That poses no risk to the county. I know it's a little more inconvenient, but from a risk standpoint, it's probably time well spent.
So whether it's planning or records or assessor or whomever, you're saying the public cannot come in with their flash drive?
There's a well-known fee operation. I've worked with them in other places. They do what's called a nexus study, and this gets to Tom's point about the proportionality between the fee and the service that's provided. The nexus study is intended to look at all the different work that is involved in various tasks and procedures that are either required by local or state or federal law, and assessing some sort of reasonable fee to recover the costs, for those particular tasks or work items. In the case of the mining fees, and again, I'm not sure exactly why they bifurcated it, they arrived at a 2-part fee. The first part being $148 to cover what are considered administrative costs, and I take that to mean things like file management, vehicle maintenance, those sorts of things that aren't direct costs, for each mining inspection. The second part of the fee was intended to be on a time and materials basis and would relate exactly to the amount of work at the fully burdened rate for the people doing the work that actually conducted the mining inspection. So when we had sent out the original invoice, we had thought that it was a flat fee. Both of those fees were flat, and the subsequent research indicated that the second part of the fee was intended to be on a time and materials basis, which we have informed Mr. Coe, and we're intending to inform all of the other mine owners pending the outcome of this hearing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Moving forward, assuming we don't get different direction from the board, our intention is to apply the fee the way they were intended, which is $148 will be a flat fee imposed on everyone, and the inspection itself will be based on a time and materials basis.
And you were going to speak about an hourly rate?
Right, the hourly rate is just the fully burdened rate for whatever employee does the inspection. So it varies from employee to employee, obviously. In the case of Mr. Coe's inspection and all the mining inspections that we've done here in the past year, that fully burdened rate is about $40 an hour.
And do you have any indication as to how many hours that would take?
It varies from inspection to inspection, but in Mr. Coe's case, I think it was less than 2 hours. And there is the inspection itself, which is actually the time spent at the mine. There's travel time. There's also a report that has to be prepared and submitted to the state. So I think all of that was a little less than 2 hours.
So his cost, and I know each mine would be different because of travel time and so forth, right, and what's involved in the inspection. But in his particular case, it would be roughly $80 plus $148.
That's correct.
So it'd be about $228.
Roughly, yes.
All right. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, does any of the other supervisors have questions or comments?
I'm curious, we have 15 mines, and they seem to be in all kinds of different states.
Yes.
And it would take, I guess there may be classes of operations within that. Some are completely idle, but potentially operative. Some have been abandoned or, pretty much not in an ongoing operational mode and not likely to be in the lifetime of the people who currently own them. And then others that are sporadic, on-off, and finally others that are working mines. I'm just curious whether you see any reason to treat any of those potential classifications differently in relation to the time and materials or energy necessary to deal with them. And what is our state mandate? What's our requirement to do annual or other inspections? And lastly, how do we, if the state waived their fees for this, what was the basis upon which that happened? And is that instructive in any way toward the treatment of a particular class of mines? I don't know much about this, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, and I don't claim to be an expert in our authority or our obligations under SMARA either. However, the mandate is that we inspect on an annual basis all active mines. And that's what this process is about. Active means, at least the way I understand it, is not necessarily producing, but active and open. I think the other classification is closed and subject to some sort of reclamation.
So there's only two
I believe
that
that's basically the two classifications. So the law itself, that we're under, doesn't necessarily talk about whether a mine is producing, is economically viable, or is idle, or anything like that. I mean, maybe I'm mistaken there, but I think that is the case. And the simple fact remains that because the state requires us to do the inspection, the work is done whether the mine is idle or inactive or active or producing or not. The same work is done for the same reasons. And that's why I think the fee that was actually originally intended and to be implemented was a fair fee, because it only applied to that work being done on a time and materials basis.
All right. So in your view, the discussions about whether this is or is not an idle mine makes no difference
and it may have some pertinence for the fee waiver process that Mr. Coe experienced with the state. I do not know what the basis for them waiving the fee was. It sounds like, based on his remarks, that there was some deference given to whether a mine is actually producing. I don't know what those standards are. We certainly don't have a standard here in the county to waive fees on that basis.
I had another question that came up during the course of the previous presentation, but I've been wondering what our policies are in relation to a couple of things. One is notification to stakeholders or affected parties when we establish a new fee, and what is the protocol for raising existing fees in the way of notification?
I don't claim to be an expert on that either, and that's one of the reasons why you hire these firms like Maximus to do this work, because they're experts in what they do. However, I believe there is a notification process required, given that these were county-wide fees. And this was one fee that was within a comprehensive fee study and update that was done for the Community Development Agency as a whole, and these fees applied county-wide. And I think my guess is, and I don't know this for an absolute fact, but my guess is that the notification that was required was to notify everyone in the county, not necessarily by individual mail, but through some other notification process like we do for general plan amendments and things of that nature, which is typically banner ads in the newspaper and other methods. But again, I defer to county council on maybe some other details about that notification requirement that I'm not aware of.
The fee process that was followed here is provided by the government code. It's section 66016, and as he described, it applies to a new fee or an increase in an existing fee, and basically just is the same public hearing type process that we follow. And I checked with the clerk's office and looked at the documents. It appears to me that we did, in fact, follow the requirements of the statute for increasing or establishing new fees.
All right, just from my own perspective, I know it's very appreciated when people get advance notice of things, and we've had a number of things that affected people where we posted in the newspaper, and it turns out that, for instance, in my district, only about 450 subscriptions exist for that particular newspaper out of the, I think it's 4,000 and some households. So when we have a group of 15 in a central industry or one that had been historic, sometimes we might go beyond our legal minimum to be able to let people know where it's feasible, where it's affordable. I do understand that doing a direct mail to 10,000 households is economically prohibitive, but maybe we should try to establish some threshold within our budgetary constraints to let groups like this know in advance and directly, rather than the generic notifications that we've been using. And I do recognize that if we do it to one, we need some pretty clear policies to differentiate those that we do notify from those that we don't, and maybe that's legally impossible, but I'd sure like to try where it's a good courtesy and one that I think would be most appreciated. That said, my opinion at this point is if we can't differentiate the classes within the group, and you've made a good faith effort in doing a time and materials that's very reasonable both in terms of our own internal process but also in comparison to the things that Gary, the other fees that Gary raised, it seems like you've gone an extra mile to adjust and accommodate, and I'm just not yet sure exactly what the appeal is. Is it to throw this whole thing out? Is it to establish a different class? Is it to, what would be the basis for overturning a fee that's been appropriately created, vetted, adopted, and applied?
Well, I just want to make it clear, I didn't adjust anything. All I did was do the research and actually apply the fee the way it was originally intended.
That's why you adjusted our practice and implemented appropriately to the board's initial adoption of the...
And my understanding from Mr. Coe is that his request now is to have this fee waived for this year. Again, beyond that, I don't know, what his intentions are.
I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah.
I just am trying to ascertain the basis for that. There's got to be a legal basis for this board to take action, and I'm not sure what the exception, what that basis is. I have yet to hear it, and I'm not asking you that. I think I'm asking Mr. Coe to speak specifically to that, if possible.
Before we do that,
And ask us to put a requested document on their flash drive.
True.
And at some point when it's technically feasible to do it, so county would not be at risk, you will make that change?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah. I believe that, one of my primary duties is to protect our infrastructure. So as we move forward and technology progresses, then I'm happy to keep up with the technology and make that all happen. And also, I know county departments have realized the number of requests they're getting are burdensome to staff and are working diligently to put more and more information out on the web where it's accessible to everybody. I know we do the same thing with our GIS data. It's available on an FTP site, so everybody can go get it. It definitely has streamlined the effort in fulfilling public record requests in that regard.
Howard, I'd like to ask you a question. You mentioned that you are happy to burn a CD.
They pertain to Jim Jones. Okay. Jim, in getting to answer all of the questions that Mr. Coe rose when he was standing at the podium there in his letter, he's referring to Article 13D of the California Constitution, and he lists several possible violations of them. Have you looked at what he's referring to?
I think those are provisions, as he says, that are fees that arise from the incidence of ownership. This is an inspection fee. It's a payment for a service that's being provided. Whether you want the service or not, it's required under SMERA. And so it doesn't come under those provisions. It comes under the statute that I read to you.
So this article that he's raising is not can't be applied for this particular.
No, sir.
Did you hear that, Tom? What his interpretation is?
I guess we need to spend some more time. I've been reading Article 13D of the Constitution. It says the agency shall not conduct a public hearing upon the proposed fee or charge not less than 45 days after mailing the notice of the proposed fee or charge to the record owners of such identified parcel upon which the fee or charge are proposed for imposition. At the public hearing, the agency shall consider all protests against the proposed fee or charge. How does this differentiate between this fee and I don't understand the county counselor, Mr. Jones's thoughts.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard him say that would apply to a fee that is strictly a parcel-based fee, and this particular fee was for the purpose of establishing a value for compensating the county for a service rendered.
Which has two different legal procedures for adoption.
Do you provide the CD?
We have CDs and DVDs. Usually we charge for their cost. It's like $1. I don't know. I mean, it's nominal charge to have that.
Okay. I suppose that somebody that would be eager to pay $1 to get a document or a series of documents on a CD. It's been a while since I bought a flash drive, but they're coming down in price as well. I mean, is it possible that your office might consider giving people an option? I mean, I think I have seen some reference lately to the newest generation of laptops don't even have a CD or disc port. So if it came down to the option of paying $5 for a flash drive or $10 for a flash drive, I mean, once you've driven down here, you've invested that much money in gasoline.
So let me make sure I'm understanding your request. The encrypted flash drives are more than $5 or $10. But as I'm understanding what you're asking is, say, for example, we purchased 20 flash drives and kept them in-house, and as documentation was needed, we could issue them for their cost. That would be fine. That way we know that the flash drive is new, it doesn't contain anything harmful to the network.
Yeah, but if it's stored in your cabinet, then I wouldn't think that there'd be any risk. I see Mr. Infacino shaking his head back there, yes, affirmatively.
Yeah, that seems like a good suggestion, so yes.
Okay.
I'd like to echo that same thing and see whether we can take it as far through this as we can. We have two basic concerns that need to be reconciled. One is our own protection and our system protection. Second is fulfilling our obligation to share information as broadly as possible without impediments, without roadblocks, and without undue interference in the process or delay. We have all this technology that's changing all the time, and we're trying to create a policy that governs this. I want to make sure that those twin goals are reflected in this, and that wherever feasible, that protection and the public's right to know are reconciled. This is one good suggestion, but I also think that there may be other things that will come our way, and I'd like to make sure our policy anticipates that. And I'd like to also make a comment about this, which is that we seem to have nationally, statewide, and locally, as we hear public comment, people who are, for a variety of reasons, some more fact-based and others more emotional, but all equally heartfelt, that government is not responsive to the needs of the people. That's, no nuclear science view. You don't have to be brilliant to perceive that. But it is exactly policies like this, where we're thinking of our own protection, that get people who have legitimate rights and reasons to know ticked off with us. And I want to make sure we're reconciling these two things effectively. I'm the last person on this board, except maybe my friend Tom here, on the technological brilliant front. We're still communicating with two tin cans connected by a string in some parts of my own district. But I do think, for those of you who are real smart about this stuff, that paying attention to both the public's right and ours and reconciling them is the best approach. I really appreciate Supervisor Thomas's suggestion here. The point made earlier was that we took at least the legally required steps in both notification and the timing and process of adoption for adopting the Maximus study fees. These are again fees for service rather than parcel-based fees.
Yes, I think that's correct. What both of you said is correct.
Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time belaboring. We've already spent a lot more time than this whole thing's been worth, but I think I'd like to take that portion of this offline or get some counsel with that, because I don't think this is right. But,
okay, I think we'll take your advice and we'll take this part of the conversation offline. Thank you on that, Mr. Kerr. Are there any other questions or comments from the board on this? Yes.
This really doesn't apply to this particular thing, but I wonder if we are taking this as an example. Are there other possible examples in that fee structure where Maximus intended for a fee to be a time and material thing and we've misinterpreted their objective?
No, I reviewed the entire recommendation list, that Maximus brought to the board, and there were only several fees that were intended to be on a time and materials basis. This was one, and there were several others related to environmental review, and that was it.
Okay. A couple of times in this hearing, there's been a reference to SMIRA. SMARA. Can you tell?
I think it's an acronym that stands for Surface Mining and Reclamation Act.
Yes. That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is the authority under the state of California that requires us to do this inspection.
Okay. All right. But it is an act over which we have no discretion.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that's sort of the point that I wanted to establish here.
This is the best one, and I like it a lot. The governor is basically requesting, Jeannie, you said $8.5 billion. RCRC says $6.9 billion. But anyway, say $7 billion from the federal government, and to help fill the $20 billion as projected, because I think that projection will change over time, state budget deficit. And then what he said is if we don't get it from the federal government, and he's already set this up by saying that we send more money to the federal government than we receive back. So then he says if we don't get this money, then he will have to pull the following. If the money does not come in from the federal government, the proposed trigger reductions will be. And so what he has is a list, and I'll just quickly go over them, but he's basically going to say is this is all, if he pulls the trigger, he's going to basically blame it on the federal government rather than the state government. I mean, that's how this thing is clearly being set up. But the trigger would be eliminating $1 billion from the California Work Opportunity and Responsibility to Kids, which is the CalWORKS program, $847 million from existing mental health services with Prop 63 funds, $532 million reduced Medi-Cal eligibility to the minimum allowed under current federal law, and eliminating most remaining options. $508 million cut reduced state employee salaries by an additional 5%. Obviously, that's going to take some negotiations. $495 million, eliminate the IHSS program. We'll be hearing a lot from Bonnie. $325 million, redirect additional county savings. I'm not quite sure what that entails. I don't know what savings we have to redirect. $126 million, eliminate the Healthy Families program. $280 million, eliminate non-court required inmate rehabilitation programs. And I think a lot of that was on the drug laws, where they said if you were, you had to go into mandatory counseling and rehabilitation, and I think a lot of that's proposed to go away if the trigger gets pulled. $115 million, eliminate various health service programs funded by Prop 99. $112 million, eliminate funding for enrolled growth at the University of California State University. $100 million, make an unallocated reduction to trial courts. Where's Judge Muhini when we need him? $79 million, freeze the level of awards and income eligibility for Cal Grants, and $36 million, eliminate funding for the Transitional Housing Placement for Foster Youth Plus program. That adds up to $4.6 billion, which does not cover the $6.9 billion that he's asking from the federal government. But then he basically has some revenue increases totaling $2.4 billion, so you add those two together, it's $7 billion. And the revenue increases extend a suspension of a business's ability to reduce taxable income, extend reduction in the credit for each dependent on the personal income tax, delay use of business credits by unitary groups of corporations, delay the change to the single sales tax factor allocation method for multi-state corporate income tax. So basically it's tax increases by doing away with deductions. Lower to 30% the first year phase-in of the ability of corporations to carry back losses 2 years. Of direct concern to counties is a statutory request, and they had it on the radio. I was listening to it when I was in Sonora earlier this morning, to reclassify certain non-serious, non-violent, non-sex offender felonies to misdemeanors, or, quote, 366-day felonies, resulting in which has to be over a year to go to state prison. So that throws them, resulting in more persons being incarcerated in county detention facilities. And they did a raising of the hands at RCRC of how many detention facilities in the rural counties of those present, and there was just about everybody there, but maybe one or two representatives. So it was probably 25 or 26 counties that were there. And how many, to raise hands if you were either under a state-ordered cap, which we were, or your detention facilities were at capacity. And geez, it was like, 80, 90% of the people raised their hands. So I don't know where you're going to put them in county facilities. Courthouse construction. The governor's budget proposes to continue or complete the construction or innovations of courthouses for the following RCRC counties, and we're included there: Calaveras. The homicide trial costs that we did, that's in there for rural counties that we did with the Ning trial, is being eliminated entirely. So if we get some big homicide trial in our county, we're going to have to pay 100% of it, unless we can get special legislation through. Let's see, it says the rural sheriff's grant citizens option for public safety no longer are funded by general funds dollars, but are funded by an increase in we're changed to an increase in the vehicle license fees. They will be reduced substantially because vehicle license fee revenues have dramatically fallen, resulting in reductions to most of these public safety programs. So there's going to be hits to the Sheriff's Department along with more inmates. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We do get reimbursement for the special election.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
Have you seen the check, Jeannie?
Not yet.
Well, that's the governor's proposed
That's-
budget. It hasn't
it's
been
next year.
adopted.
Yeah,
so,
we won't get it till-
You're not going to get it till something's adopted. The Williamson Act I covered, the Healthy Families program I covered, and home supportive services, which is Bonnie's issue, is the budget proposes to limit the provision of services to consumers with a functional index under 4.0, which is the neediest. This action would remove an estimated 427,000 elderly and disabled persons, or 87% of enrollees, from the program. So the program would get, pretty significantly gutted. The governor's budget also proposes to reduce state participation in the wages of the IHSS workers to the state minimum wage of $8 per hour plus 60 cents per hour for health benefits. So the employees that remain will take a significant reduction. I believe we were paying $10 plus benefits. Is that correct?
We were.
Or did I include benefits? I think we were paying $10 plus benefits.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
And it would ultimately create a job that pays less than getting a job at McDonald's to take care of seniors, people with disabilities.
Okay, the governor...
The ones that are, the reduction.
The 30% is what would be left.
The governor's budget eliminates all funding for both Prop 36 programs, and those were the ones that were the offender treatment programs that I just briefly mentioned earlier. This is a good one, too. I like this one. The governor's budget proposes to eliminate all general fund monies for state parks and to backfill these monies with revenues generated from the Tranquillin Ridge oil leases off the shore of Santa Barbara. So in other words, he put that in last year also. So basically the way the governor's budget is if those oil leases don't go forward off Santa Barbara and they drill for oil off Santa Barbara, there is absolutely no money to maintain state parks. So that's going to be another big issue going forward, as it was last year. The gas swap, I don't really quite understand. It says the governor's budget proposes a dramatic reorganization of the funding mechanism for transportation in California. Specifically, the governor's proposal will eliminate sales tax on gasoline, Prop 42. So it goes to zero because it eliminates it 100%, and replace these monies with an increase of 10.8 cents per gallon in the state excise tax on gasoline, which is currently 18 cents. So it'll go to 28.8 cents, or 28.8 cents. Coupled with the sales tax on gasoline, approximately $6 billion per year is provided to fund transportation. Under the governor's new scheme, the base 18 cents per gallon state excise tax would be supplemented with this new 10.8 cents for a combined total of 28.8. The governor's budget proposal would allocate that additional 10.8 cents per gallon as follows: $629 million for local streets and roads, $629 million for the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is STIP, which is managed by the COG, and $610 million for the general fund for transportation bond debt service. So that's like paying the bonds off. It says the distribution breakdown for local streets and roads and the STIP is consistent with existing Prop 42 requirements. I'm not sure it equals the same amount of money, however. I think there's a reduction in the amount of money. It says the excise tax would be adjusted as more revenue is needed for increasing transportation bond debt service from Prop 1B. The gas tax would increase incrementally to 33.9 cents per gallon in the years 2020 and 21. So it continues to go up. The other issue we had is we talked a little bit about AB 32, which is the implementation of the man-made greenhouse gas sort of initiative, and of course California once again has to lead the nation in that. They talked about one Republican assemblyman or legislator, I don't know if assembly or Senate, legislator, put in to abolish AB 32. It failed. So then the assemblyman came back, or I should say legislator, because I don't know what house he was in, came back and put in
a well-established respect for Mr. Coe and his efforts in and for this county. But this is not really unlike back in the days when I used to own an airplane. I mean, there's an annual inspection fee for an airplane that you've got to pay whether you fly it or not. I mean, you do the inspection on January 1st, it might cost you $5,000 for the inspection. You could have the airplane in the hangar for 365 days or 4 days, and then it's due for inspection the next January 1st, and you got to pay another $5,000 with 0 time on the engine or the airframe. So, Mr. Coe, you made reference to the fact that this is an asset, a potentially valuable asset. You mentioned 9 million cubic yards of clay that might be merchantable. I hope that it is saleable. And my view of this particular fee structure is that it just it's an unfortunate thing that in our society we get
until the unemployment rate in California reaches 5.5%. And RCRC said that the RCRC strongly supported that. They said they didn't do it on the basis of that it would, hurt the economy or damage job creation, etc. They just did it on basically a budget principle, and that everything's getting cut, and the only thing in the state budget that's being fully funded is AB 32. And that has a lot of people, at least in RCRC, pretty upset that they're not going to take any budget cuts at all, and that seems to be the most sacred of all sacred expenditures, is to fully fund the implementation of AB 32, which everybody pretty much recognizes would be fairly devastating on the California economy. So that I thought was rather interesting. Now, I didn't have a chance to come back and talk to you guys on this, but I know you'll be very proud of my vote on this.
Move it along, Tom.
SCA, which is in the Senate, 4 would allow the voters to be able to vote for any state or congressional candidate regardless of party affiliation. This we did once before, and the Supreme Court found it to be invalid, that they thought the parties should be able to pick their own candidates, or why have parties? Well, SCA 4 would somehow adjust the wording so that they think it would be constitutional, but it would have no impact on the presidential primary process. I guess that's why I think it was the U.S. Supreme Court that kicked it out, because they said you can't do that. So I guess they're just going to do it.
Federal offices or just the presidency?
Just as the presidential primary. My bet would be it would be all federal offices, and this would apply, but it doesn't say that. So RCRC staff wanted to recommend that, and the reason they want to recommend it is because they believe that, and they stated this, that they believe this process would produce less partisan or less ideologically driven members of the legislature. Something that can only be a positive outcome for the plight of impacting county government. Well, they took the motion and had a second, and then under discussion, I said, well, I'm not going to vote for this. And it looked like it was going to pass unanimously until I spoke up. That's why I'm bringing this up. My impact on RCRC. And I said, RCRC shouldn't be in the position of trying to rig an election to get a particular outcome, because you want more centrist candidates, is what they said. I said that's no different than redistricting, where you try to determine the outcome of an election before you have an election. We should be for fair and open and completely open elections. All candidates get to run, and people get to vote for whom they like. So there was a little bit of discussion on that, and then they took the vote, and there were 4 or 5 other supervisors present representing other counties that decided I was correct in that argument, and they didn't think we should be trying to rig the outcome of an election so we would get candidates that RCRC would prefer over other candidates. But it still passed by 21 to 4 or 5 or something. Okay, the other thing, and Jim's here, and we had this discussion, and maybe you guys can remember where we left it, because I don't remember where we left it, and it was almost the identical discussion. This was interesting since both counties representatives were present. We talked about the lawsuit between Tehama County and Shasta County, and it concerns the allocation of monies derived from registered vehicles. And I'm going to tear this off and leave it with Jim. And we had the discussion before. What happens is if somebody lives in a different area code, if their address, I think, is in a different area code. And maybe I forget what we did. We had the issue. We had it in Valley Springs, and outside of Valley Springs along 26, where people would get their mail in Linden.
Yes.
But lived in and so the question is, who gets the sales tax when they do from the sale of motor fuels and Okay. Anyway, it comes down to a sales tax. Who gets the allocation? And I could read this whole thing, but it's fairly long, so I won't, because Marita wants me to move along. But we had that issue here, and it affects quite a few rural counties where people get their mail outside of the county, so they have it outside the county area or zip code. And I want to say ours was more maybe on elections or census or something, but I'll leave this with Jim, and you might see if we have a stake in that lawsuit. I think it's in Superior Court in Sacramento. I'm not saying we should get involved. Nobody really wanted to get involved, but it is going to have a significant impact on various counties, and you might see if you can make some determination what impact it might have on our county.
Okay, I'll get back to you on it. Okay,
the next one, and I'll leave this with Jim. My favorite one's on the TOT, the Transient Occupancy Tax. It basically, this is regarding the imposition and collection of transient occupancy tax. And it says counties to impose a transient occupancy tax, according to the most current RCR survey, at least 27 of 31 counties have a TOT which range from 4 to 12%. The average percentage is 8.48%, and the amounts collected vary from rural county to rural county. For counties such as Mariposa, which has Yosemite, it's a very significant source of revenues. Under Article 13, it's too bad Tom Cole isn't still. Under Article 13, Section 32 of the California Constitution, a taxpayer who wishes to challenge the assessment of a state tax must pay the disputed amount before seeking recourse in the courts or other proceedings, commonly known as the pay first rule. In recent years, the rise of online travel booking entities has stirred controversy with respect to leveling and collecting TOTs. Travel entities such as Orbitz, Expedia, Travelocity, etc., alleging failure to remit the appropriate amount of TOT. In some situations, the funds in question can represent up to hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue annually. Well, what it comes down to is I don't know if we've done this or not, but we have to have something on the books that say if there's a dispute that you have to pay first before you can go to court. And if we don't have that in our code, then you don't have to pay first until after there's a court determination. So you have like XYZ online travel agency purchases 10 rooms from Acme Hotel. I'm not on there. And that.
You must be going to L&M.
So Acme Hotel claims that they do not know the price point of the sale between Mr. Apple. So I guess these travel agencies book a set of rooms and then they resell them. And so nobody knows quite what the actual price is that the TOT should be assessed on. Anyway, if we don't have, specifically the bill would nullify any first pay rule that is incorporated into a TOT ordinance. And so it tells you what we have to do to make sure that they have to pay first before they can go to a dispute resolution, whether it be court or otherwise. So I'll leave that with Jim. I have one more, Marita.
Carol, could you let Tom know it'll be 2 o'clock?
Recent population shifts in counties, and it just out of curiosity, 11 RCRC counties lost population in the last year. Of California's 58 counties, only RCRC counties saw negative growth. Sacramento suburban counties continue to lead in population growth. And then it shows Calaveras County, we lost 0.28% is the change in population from July 2008 to July 2009. So we lost basically a quarter of 1% of our population. So we're not growing at this point. Talk to the school districts and they'll confirm that. That completes my comments for today, Madam Chair.
Mr. Walensky.
I'm not sure I can give my report. I've fallen into the existential void, and that means a complete state of despair. But I'll try to persist anyway. This week I have a meeting of the Motherlode Job Training Board in Sonora on Wednesday. There are 2 hearings that I want to appraise people of on Thursday. One is the hearing, the Air Pollution Control District hearing on the Buena Vista power plant, which is the biofuels conversion from the lignite plant down there in Ione. That's happening on Thursday, as well as a meeting right here in San Andreas from 3 to 4:45. The USDA and the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, in conjunction with the RCDs in the region, are holding a meeting on funds that are available and how to apply for them from the USDA Rural Development and Green Jobs projects. This is an opportunity for people to learn how to access those federal dollars, and it's held in our library at 3 o'clock on Thursday. I will be going to
regulations imposed upon us, but this, in my view, is nothing different than the FAA requirements on an annual inspection on an airplane. This is an annual inspection on a mine, and I think that if it's only going to cost $228 annually to do that, my hope is that you, at some point, that with our help, that we would be able to market the availability of your clay, and you'd have $10 or $12 million of sales that might help offset that 228. And I'm not saying that facetiously by any means, but my objective has always been to help you promote the enterprise that you have going out there. But we simply are in an environment right now where we can't give away our services anymore. So that's my final comment on this.
I guess I'll make my comments on this. I mean, this is an example of a state mandate.
In West Point to talk about the projects that will be taking place up there this coming year, and also the Lumberjack Day crab feed in West Point on Saturday. An unfortunate simultaneous scheduling with the Calaveras Foundation dinner, which I will have to miss as a result. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this does have at least some up news, or potentially up news economically for rural counties, and may point the way. There's no question that we are going to be in the most serious economic straits of our lifetimes, unless you went through the Great Depression, which I don't see anybody quite near. Tom may have been a supervisor back then, but other than that, we have a crisis that defies any kind of logical response. We are eviscerating programs and hurting people that we are charged with protecting. And therefore, it is a requirement that counties begin to take a look not just at the program aspect, but how are we structured to deliver what's left? How can we create efficiencies? One of the ways we've done that, and this county has been a pioneer in this, is to form JPAs. So, for instance, a great benefit to us is the Family Support JPA, which currently includes Alpine, Amador, and Calaveras County. We used to have 3 separate departments. We now have 1 agency. That agency is producing actually results better than any of the 3 had done before. So it's created efficiencies. The staff is about half of what it once was. The administrative overhead has gone from 3 separate buildings or office spaces to essentially 1 with a couple of outstations. So clear efficiencies. And now, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that the agency has entered into an exploration with Tuolumne County as to whether that would they would be part of. This was at the initiation of Tuolumne, actually, seeing the effect of this JPA. And is thinking about coming on into it. This is sort of notice of that. There's no proposal before us, but we would be required to change the Joint Powers Agreement in order to accommodate them, but it might create greater efficiencies. I would suggest that this is a model that we may want to take a look at in a wide range of services that we provide in the Central Sierra, and that there may be considerable cost advantage to creating JPAs in many of our service areas. We have, for instance, air pollution control districts, each of them separate, but we have sort of the same elevations, some of the same problems, and there's common reason to have an economy of scale in response to that. But there are many others, and I won't bore people with that because our time is short. But I hope that as we develop our approach to the next several years, that our structural, our way we deliver services and the structure through which we do it should mitigate toward the maximum deployment of our resources to the point of service rather than our in-house considerations or the level of administration that we can produce over a shrinking realm. This just means a whole level of coordination and cross-jurisdictional collaboration far beyond anything we'd ever thought of before. And that's just for our own survival, not even for enhancement of any programs in the next few years.
Done.
Done.
Mr. Tuffanelli.
Madam Chair, I have one board assignment. That is on Thursday from 1 to 4, attending the COG orientation for Madam Chair at the Senior Center. That's all that I have.
I do encourage the board to go, including Supervisor Tryon.
I thought I was the instructor.
What time again was that?
It's from 1 to 4. The Senior
Thursday.
Center, it's an orientation to the
You're not
complexities of transportation funding. It's so convoluted.
And I think we should have took a vote, or you should have polled the board
Whether you should.
on telling Tom that the chamber meeting was not on this Thursday. But you just blurted it out.
We wanted to
Thank you, Marita.
Are you saying that you
You're
wanted...
a wonderful chair.
It's like having Tom show up on a day the office is closed.
Is the
I
supervisor
did
from
that
District
once.
1 suggesting that he wants to see Tom all dressed up but nowhere to go?
And I did expect to hear, I did want to ask Mr. Tryon, or Supervisor Tryon, now that he has had several weeks to mentor Supervisor Callaway, if he has a report on how long it's going to take, his time frame to convert her to the other side.
Well, the progress has been incremental. I look at this as being something that will require a full year.
Well, I would say the mentor is a bit deficient in this morning's process and couldn't even prevent a 10-minute suggested break between the Pledge of Allegiance and the adoption of our consent agenda.
You know, I don't know how I'm going to do it without you gentlemen. Mr. Thomas.
Yes, I have a number of things to discuss. Probably won't take as long as Supervisor Tryon, but Tom, you didn't mention Mr. Jim Hemmender's favorable report on the status of the septic tank issue. I didn't hear the report, but I knew that he was going to make one. I had talked to him at that reception that night.
Yeah, no, I didn't comment on it. He gave one on Thursday. We met Wednesday, and then we had the annual dinner, and then we met again Thursday. And he was the last person on the agenda, and I had a meeting back here, and I think I made everything on the RCRC meeting but Jim's report.
Okay, well,
the last thing on the agenda. So if you'd like to give Jim's report, why, please do so.
Well, I don't think I can give his report, but most of us in rural counties have really been watching carefully about this. It was at AB 887, the stringent rules on the prohibition of septic tanks unless there are certain criteria that you have to that you would be able to prove that you had. But anyway, Jim has been following that, and the report briefly that he gave me on the night of the reception was that it's not going to be as bad as we had thought. That actually the counties are, from all indications, the counties will be given the specific responsibility for self-administering within their counties. It is not going to be a one-size-fits-all type of a thing, and won't be nearly as bad as the session that some of you may have attended here in this room. It was very daunting. Supervisor Walensky, you mentioned about this USDA session that's going to take place at the library at 2 or 3 o'clock on tomorrow. But actually, what I got off the web was that Jeannie Hayward is going to facilitate that. She's from the Resource Connection, and this will be exploring ways to rejuvenate and promote local businesses, creating jobs by rebuilding the America's infrastructure, creating new opportunities from existing ones, such as value-added agricultural products, supporting job growth among small businesses, and preparing workers for the 21st century jobs. And these are forums that are being held all around the state, so that would be worthwhile for people to go to that. There is I think Jeannie Boyce will be the featured speaker tomorrow at a luncheon meeting for the Taxpayers Association. I hope to be able to attend that.
You're speaking with the chamber, actually.
Yeah, but that's up at the Murphy's Hotel at noon tomorrow. There is a large tax associated with attending that taxpayers meeting, I think. But, also, I wanted to just not go into depth, but there was an MSOC, the Emergency Medical Services Oversight Committee, meeting here last Thursday night. Supervisor Walensky and I both attended that meeting. I saw Jeannie Boyce attending part of that, too. I think that our system looks like it may actually work. The folks that that have been assigned by each of us to that MSOC committee are listening intently, and I think that they're going to be looking at the renewal of the contract and fixing some of the deficiencies that may be perceived to exist in the past 5 years or nearly 5 years of that operation. Okay, so I think that pretty much concludes this. There will be next week. There's the economic development, the Central Sierra Economic Development meeting will be next Wednesday. I'll be attending that after our next week's board meeting. So I think that about concludes it. I do want to talk with you, Jenny, about some stuff that came on the internet about some funds or possibility with the train may have left on this about some recovery zone
upon the county that we have no choice in. We have to, there's an annual inspection and a state report that is mandated. We have the same thing to a greater extent in the Environmental Health Department, where we do gas stations, weights and measures, and we're having to charge fees because these are, the Coupa program, I remember, was extremely controversial, and the county fought that with the state. If we don't charge the people for, like, the mine owners or the gas station owners, then we're going to be asking all the taxpayers of Calaveras to pay for this service out of the general fund. And as sympathetic as the board is to the economy in Calaveras and throughout California at this time, I'm not sure that I would want to ask the taxpayers of Calaveras to subsidize the mines, the gas stations, weights and measures, and all the other.
So if you could fill me in on what you know about that. So I think that concludes my report. How about you?
Okay, I have Calaveras Public Power Agency tomorrow. I have Calaveras State Association of Counties Ag and Natural Resources meeting. Tom will attend Fish and Game for me tomorrow, 5:30, Tom? Write it down.
I have just an iron grasp of a memory. There's no way I can forget it. Thursday I will be.
Backup plan.
Thursday I'll be in Sacramento for the executive committee of the California State Association of Counties. I'll then come to the Council of Governments meeting. I then have a Juvenile Justice Commission meeting after the Council of Governments meeting, and I too will be at the Calaveras Foundation event on Saturday. And I really publicly need to thank the Sheriff's Department of its Pass Fire District and all the agencies that participated. We had a mini MAC, Jeannie, up at, we used the fire station in Ebbets Pass on Blagan and Arnold. So it really went smooth, and Clay Hawkins was his outstanding organized OES officer self. Jeannie, did you have?
Just a couple things. Next week, February 2nd, we had a couple of public hearings that were scheduled that have been continued. And so the main item for your discussion next week will be the general plan update. So you have a fairly light agenda. I will be at the Taxpayers Association luncheon tomorrow as their speaker. I've also been invited to the Chamber annual dinner to be their speaker as well.
See, Jeannie would have told me. Jeannie will show up on Thursday, Tom.
I'll be at the County Administrative Officers Association, my first meeting as the rookie on Friday.
This Friday?
This Friday.
And Mr. Jones?
Nothing here.
Okay, this meeting stands in recess, and the board will convene an active agenda on February 2, and we will convene our study session at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Chinese
Programs that the state mandates the counties put out. So I will not be supporting the waiver of this fee because someone has to pay, and I'm not sure that I think the general fund should be paying for that. Mr. Tuffanelli, this is in your area.
I would move to deny the appeal. On the fact that exactly what was being stated here, that the fee is proper. I appreciate Mr. Coe's efforts in bringing this to our light, to the county, with the initial fee that was charged. The reductions in actual fee cost are more appropriately in line. I'm sure the other 14 mine owners that have active mines in the county that were charged this fee are thankful to you also. But I would move to deny this appeal.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any other comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Mr. Coe, thank you. comment. Okay, I'm going to just do a housekeeping item. We were supposed to do a study session at 11, it's 12:15. We have Public Works waiting. I thought we would do item 14, then I believe we should take a break. I'm sorry, that wasn't how the schedule went this morning when we spoke. Is there any comments from the board on that? Then let's do item 14, and we'll take a break till 1:30.
God, you're going to give me enough time to actually give my RCRC report, huh?
No, I'm not, Tom. But I will start with you, and I'll put the timer on.
Let's see, two quick items. I will be attending the, I think along with other board members, the reason I'm bringing it up, the Calaveras County Chamber dinner at Greenhorn Creek on Thursday night, and I'll be attending, I believe, also along with other supervisors.
Tom, that's on the 4th of February.
Yeah.
It's
The chamber?
The 4th,
I
yes.
thought it was this Thursday.
No.
No. Okay, then then the dinner I'll be attending this week will be the one Saturday night by the Calaveras Foundation at the Native Sons Hall in Murphy's. Well, I'm glad you said something. I had it on my mind.
But I have something I'd like you to attend for me.
What?
Fish and Game Commission meeting on Wednesday
Okay, I think I
at
asked.
5:30. Can you attend that for me?
Yes.
You will make it regardless
Yes.
of weather conditions?
Okay, let me write this down. Wednesday, 5:30.
Yes, I have to be in Bear Valley, so
Okay.
I'd appreciate it if you could.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll give my RCRC report. I did attend the RCRC meeting last week. There was a lot of talk on the budget. In fact, that's probably the highest discussion, and I'm just going to highlight those sort of areas that probably affect us the most. On the governor's budget proposal, the impact to RCRC counties, the major impacts include no restoration of the Williamson Act subventions, enactment of the Emergency Response Initiative, which is a surcharge on insurance policies to better fund disaster and wildlife management, the gas tax swap, replacing the monies derived from the sales tax on gasoline with an increase in the state gasoline excise tax, which basically does away with Prop 42. But Prop 42 was voted on by the voters, so by doing the swap, Prop 42 will remain in place. It will just have zero for a monetary balance, and then it will go then to the excise tax.
And they think that's a legal transaction? Is that?
He thinks he thinks there's nothing stopping him from doing away with the sales tax. And the Prop 42 fund balance will just be zero, so you will get your fair distribution of zero, which is zero.
Just doesn't seem right on the surface.
Well, I mean, everything I'm saying here is the governor's proposed budget, and nothing's been adopted, obviously. We're going to go through this every RCRC meeting, the updates from the baseline. It backfills a number of state health and human services program with First 5 and Mental Health Services Act funds. And it does include reimbursement for the May 19th special election. There is some cash flow concerns. If the state cannot borrow, the state is due to run out of cash. I believe it's in March. Yeah,